Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
And that is hit well and hit deep to left field. Going back on it is low at the wall. Looking up. See you later. Jeremy Pena homers for the second straight day. 1-0 Astros.
The righty turns those yellow cleats and deals home. And P sends a high smash in the air to left. Cameron going back, looking up. Oh, this one way out. Gone off the facing of the second deck in left center.
3-0. Judge drives it deep left field, way back and gone. Goodbye. On a 3-0 pitch, Judge lasers home run number 300. The fastest ever to hit that mark.
Pitch swung on, hit in the air left field. Going back on it is Stowers at the wall. It's gone! And he has turned it around with one swing of the bat. Kyle Schwarber. A grand slam, and the Phillies now lead it 6-5.
The 1-2. Swinging the fly ball to center. That one's deep. Robles on the run. Still going. Over his head. Tigers win. Meadows around third. Akil Baddoo delivers.
Good morning. Welcome into Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. I'm Ravi. Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. DB will be joining me in just a little bit when he gets done with practice over there at Westside. Until then, it's just Shane to keep me company this morning. What's up, Shane? How are you this morning, Shane?
I'm okay.
You're doing all right? You're doing okay?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good.
That's always good to hear. We love to hear it. Got a good show coming up for you this morning. As always, we've got our Thursday regulars in Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider, coming up at 8:45. Of course, we'll talk to our dear friend Michael Bruntz at 9. But before we get to any of that, we're going to talk to Tom Dienhart to continue in our preview of Nebraska's opponents. Tom, of course, with blackandgold.com covering Purdue. So we will talk to Tom at 7:45 to continue our discussion of the Nebraska football schedule, winding down to UTEP during game week, which is just a couple weeks away. 13, nope, not 13. I can't do math. 16 days, Shane. We're almost to the 2-week mark.
Come on, math.
We might be able to make it. We might be able to make this after all.
It's going to come up pretty quickly.
It is, especially after.
Sometimes not quick enough. I know there's a lot of people out there counting the days down, and they want it to get here, but it'll be here quick enough.
We're itching. We're itching to get to college football.
I can't wait.
It'll seem faster after next week when we get week 0 games. I know Nebraska's not playing yet, but we'll get real college football a week from Saturday, so that'll be exciting. And then I think we'll be in the home stretch from there, and I'll be pretty excited about it. So we've got lots to cover between now and then. One thing that I did want to touch on, we talked yesterday about JJ McCarthy and his injury. Came out after his meniscus surgery that he'll be missing the entire season, which, to be fair, wasn't the plan. We talked a lot about yesterday about kind of people's processing of information and how, we tend to forget that less than a week ago, nobody would have been that worried about JJ McCarthy missing a few weeks. I think missing the whole season is different in terms of what their actual plan was. I don't know that it'll be too different in terms of the actual results. I think Sam Darnold was going to start the season as the starter anyway, at least in their original plan. And now, obviously, that'll be his job throughout the year. But that wasn't maybe the worst news from Minnesota yesterday, as Jordan Addison got carted off the field during practice as well. So not a great stretch here for Vikings fans. Luckily, we're not talking to Shafe or BC today from Husker 24/7. We'll talk to our resident Broncos fan, Michael Bruntz. But tough day to be a Minnesota Vikings fan on that front for sure. But I do think the Jordan Addison news probably is of greater actual impact than the JJ McCarthy news. Another thing that we were talking a lot about yesterday was kind of this it's where we got started in the conversation about processing information and needing to do a little bit better. It was with the left tackle spot at Nebraska with Teddy Prohaska going down. And our good friend Jacob Padilla of Hurrdat Sports, he'll often text DB and me and kind of go through some of the points he's got either thoughts about or disagrees with. Usually disagreeing with me, if I'm being honest, but that's okay. We're still friends. About some of the things that have gone on in the show that day. And he asked, I think, a fair question, and a question that probably a lot of people at least thought. And there were some other points in here, but I think the main one that we didn't necessarily address yesterday was, is this just an offensive line that was actually good or just cleared a relatively low bar from the previous seasons? And I think it's something that a lot of different Husker fans have thought over the course of the last year or so, with the optimism around the offensive line having kind of ratcheted up a little bit. And I get it, I do, but I get a little bit frustrated because, and I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that I am some expert on offensive line play. Like, that's not who I am. That's not what I do. But what I do believe is what I see with my eyes, right? I'm not going to be able to break down technique for you or anything like that. But I do think that, when my eyes tell me something's good or bad, I can trust them. And last year, my eyes told me the offensive line play was pretty good and legitimately pretty good, not just clearing a low bar. And if you're, looking for stats or anything to back that up, Nebraska was, I'm going to go with rushing offense. Nebraska had 4.5 yards per carry. That's a number that I think just about everybody would take. They rushed for just under 180 yards per game. And I think that's a number that maybe we'd like to see a little bit higher, but I think most people would take. Now, their rushing touchdowns, DB's talked about this a lot, is not a good number. It's only 16. That number probably needs to be doubled for the amount of rushing that they did last year. But this team was legitimately good at running the football. And they were legitimately good at running the football despite a couple obstacles in their way. First and foremost, they didn't really have a passing game to keep the defenses honest whatsoever. So you're dealing with stacked boxes constantly. We've heard about it all offseason, where they've had 7, 8, sometimes 9 men in the box last year against their run. And that, it's pretty hard to get anything done that way. They still average 4.5 yards a carry and almost 180 yards per game rushing, despite the fact that there was no passing game to speak of to keep them honest. Now, part of that was quarterback play. Part of that was a rash of injuries at wide receiver. But there was another place there was a rash of injuries, and that's in the running back room as well, where you lost 2 of your top 3 backs. And so I look at it and I go, okay, they were up against it in terms of not having a balanced enough offense to be able to keep a defense honest. They were up against it in the fact that they lost 2 of their top 3 backs. And to be fair, and I've been very consistent about this, 2 of their top 3 backs that I don't think were special anyway. They're fine. Again, not disparaging them. It's a fine backfield. That's about it in my mind. So you don't have special running backs, and I don't think anyone thinks they were special last year. Even if you think they can be good this year, nobody thought they were special last year. So you have a fine group of running backs, but not special. You have no passing game to keep the defense honest. what I'm left to believe then is that the offensive line is doing a lot of work in terms of establishing that running game. That's what I'm left to believe based on what my eyes tell me, what the numbers tell me, and the facts of the situation. So that's one of the reasons that I think that the offensive line was legitimately good. Now, you can make better arguments, I would say, against the pass protection, and that's fair. I would also point out that it's really challenging to be good in pass protection when you don't really have an idea when or if your quarterback's going to get the ball out. You don't really have an idea if your quarterbacks are going to actually be passing or going to be running, and not in like an RPO design run situation, but in the fact that a lot of times they ended up just having to take off. And I don't know if that's because guys couldn't get open because there were injuries in the wide receiver room, if the quarterbacks couldn't read the field as well as they needed to, if they just weren't willing to pull the trigger on throws when they needed to. But DB quoted a stat the other day that Nebraska was actually very good in the amount of time quarterbacks had to throw the ball before pressure got to them. And between those two things, you got pass protection, allowing the quarterback time to have time to throw the ball. You've got the rushing offense, which was good despite all the factors that I listed out. And I'm left to believe that the offensive line was legitimately good, not just clearing an incredibly low bar. I get the question, though. I get the question of like, okay, is it just the fact that it was so bad prior to last year that you raise the floor to average and all of a sudden they look incredible? I get the question. I just don't think it's accurate, because it's the same question we're going to find ourselves asking, I think, this year at a certain point about the quarterback play.
You asked me the same question last year.
I ask the same question every year about quarterbacks. I just want them to be average. But that's average this year in the quarterback room is going to look better than average because of the bar we're looking at from last year. And maybe Dylan Raiola is good off the bat, and there's no question about whether he's good or average or whatever. But there's a decent chance as a true freshman, there'll be times where he's average and it looks really good because of what we're used to seeing from last year. That's okay. The offensive line can't just be average. I'm putting that out there. The offensive line can't just be average if this team is going to be good. The quarterback kind of can be. And so that's somewhere where I think we actually might be able to get fooled a little bit, where, if Nebraska can consistently complete passes, that could be the end of the sentence there. But if they can consistently complete passes on like 3rd and 6 or in these high leverage situations that they weren't able to play catch with last year, then I don't think that's a terribly high bar, but it's going to seem like a huge accomplishment at Nebraska coming off of last year. So I get the question, and I do think it applies sometimes in other places. I could make the same argument with the wide receiver rooms this year, or with the wide receiver room this year. You've got, if it stays relatively healthy, you've got a lot of options over there. You've got, I think, more dynamic options in that room than you did last year. But they could still end up being just about average compared to their talent. They don't really have to outperform their talent. And I think we're going to end up believing that they had a really good year in the wide receiver room because of what we came off of last year. And the fact that Nebraska was running out of wide receivers last year. Just having a healthy room is going to feel like a huge improvement. So the question makes sense, especially when you've been to the places Nebraska has been over the last handful of years, especially. We can go all the way back to 2016 with lack of bowl games and whatever, but there's been more recent years where the product hasn't even looked up to a certain standard that we can tend to live with. Like, it's gotten pretty bad at certain points. But I don't think we're viewing I'm not, at least. I don't think viewing the offensive line through a lens of just the poo-poo platter that we received in previous years. I think it was actually good. Now, how good can they get? That's a different question. I don't know. But I know they're the most experienced group in the Big Ten this year, and that's with Turner Corcoran, not with Teddy Prohaska at left tackle. And so I think that matters. There's a couple guys in Ben Scott and Bryce Benhart that had draftable NFL grades. To me, that matters. I know not everybody loves the PFF grades, but Ben Scott and Bryce Benhart both graded out well last year in their PFF grades, top 10, 20 in the country in their position. So these are guys that are legitimately good. Matt Rule tells us they would have had draft grades. PFF tells me that they graded out well. The team stats tell me that they were both good in run blocking and pass protection. Now, the passes didn't result in positivity because the passing game was bad. But all those things let me know this is a good group. And Nebraska probably does need them to take a step forward this year. But that doesn't change the fact that you can have expectations for this group and not feel weird about it. And part of the reason I believe this is we've got more history than not with this specific group and this specific O-line coach that things will get better, not worse. And that was kind of my larger point yesterday when I was going through the list of guys that fit sort of prototypical tackle size, which if you're curious, if it's, if you don't want to use DB standard, all the guys that grade out the highest in PFF are right in that 6'5" to 6'7". About 90% of them are between 6'5" and 6'7", and between 300 and 320 pounds. So the sizes we used yesterday were about right, I think. But you have way more evidence that this thing is going to look better year over year with Coach Raiola, specifically with Donnie, than you are that it's going to regress. We've seen year over year the product get better. We've also seen year over year the depth get better, from his last year with Frost and Mickey Joseph and Mark Whipple to his first year last year with Matt Rule to this year.
That's what I'm excited about.
There is, my point, my point of listing all those guys off yesterday wasn't to say, oh, look at all these guys. They're all good. I don't know. I have no idea which one of them are good and which one aren't. But my point is, you've got options that at least fit the mold. And what we've seen from this coaching staff and from Donnie Raiola is if you've got options that fit the mold, they will find the way to make those good football players. That's kind of the entire history of Matt Rule's coaching career. And it's what we've seen already in a short amount of time here at Nebraska. And there were no options that we felt good about last year when Nebraska did lose at times. There was I think it was only 2 games, but there were 2 games last year where Nebraska was missing 3 offensive linemen, and there were multiple games where they were missing 2. And we didn't feel good about even the starting options last year. So my point is not that, Tyler Knack or Grant Seagram or I think I mentioned Brock Knutson or Gunnar Gatula are all awesome players. My point is, with the track record we've seen of development of guys that we didn't think were ever going to be any good, especially older guys that we didn't think were going to be any good, that Donnie Raiola has beat those expectations. We have more history to believe he's going to beat our expectations of players than that those players are going to regress to whatever we think they are or worse.
It keeps you on your toes.
And so my point is simply, you should trust that track record. You should trust the track record of, even last year when we're looking at it, we're like, okay, what do we know about Henry Lutovsky? And what do we know about, what do we know about these freshmen that are coming in. Are we going to be able to play any of the freshmen at online early in the season? I mean, we've barely even talked about Grant Bricks, who was a really good recruit, came down to Nebraska and Oklahoma. That's a guy that a lot of people in the country wanted. And I don't think Nebraska should even have to think about playing him this year. Last year, we were begging or desperate to see if any of the three offensive linemen from Nebraska, Mason Goldman moved over to defense, but at the time, the three offensive linemen from Nebraska could maybe play as true freshmen.
You learn how to play football by playing football.
And it was a much more dire situation, we thought, depth-wise last year. And it ended up working out not only fine, but well. It worked out well with guys we didn't think were good in the first place. So I guess maybe I'm just saying that they deserve a little bit more benefit of the doubt. And I really don't think I can overstate, because it seems like we keep forgetting Turner Corcoran was working with the ones at the start of fall camp, at least at the open practice. And I don't think that was it didn't sound like it was a one-off. Turner Corcoran was working ahead of Teddy Prohaska. That needs to be remembered here, because you still theoretically have your starting offensive line intact. And if that goes the way you want it to, you don't necessarily have to even rotate in a ton of depth unless you want to. It's not like Nebraska runs this super high-tempo Oregon-style offense where guys are getting winded and you got to get them in and out and kind of run hockey line changes in there. That's not what Nebraska does. Their starting left tackle, their entire starting offensive line from the start of fall camp is still intact. Is it still terrible that the injury to Teddy Prohaska? Absolutely. Would he maybe have taken over at some point in the season as a starter? Maybe. I don't know. What I do know is, as far as we can tell, Nebraska has not lost anything from that starting offensive line group yet. And I think that matters to remember.
Just one of those things, like a little bump in the road,
I also think it matters to remember that by the midpoint of the season, we may have a better idea about some of the guys that I named off yesterday, because they may have gotten in some rotation. Be like, oh, that guy's actually pretty good. Remember the deal with Justin Evans last year before he ended up having to become a starter due to injury? We would see him in rotations and be like, oh, that guy's pretty good. Oh, we kind of like that guy. He's got a little nastiness to him. That's the same type of thing we could see this year with guys that are in the same spot Justin Evans was last year, redshirt freshman, guys coming off of, these body transformations like Gunnar Gatula. That's what's on the table for this year. And the track record would say we have a better chance of that happening than we do the opposite, at least with Donnie Raiola. Appreciate, as always, our guy Jacob chiming in on the topics of the show. Always brings up good points. We disagree a lot, but I still love him. Coming up next, we will get to more Hurrdat Sports Radio here, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, along with Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. I'm Ravi. Lulla. DB will be joining me in just a few minutes when he wraps up practice at Westside. We are live at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. I think we've got some comments in on the YouTube page. Tyler says, I think it's Corcoran's year to step up and prove he's the right choice to start. I think it will be okay. You can't discount his experience up to this point. Yeah, I do think the experience matters. I don't think it's something he's going to get credit for because we don't love what that experience looked like. And I think that's something that you do have to consider. You know, I usually talk about it with quarterbacks, but
if you don't love it, leave it.
You know, sometimes we get a little too focused on the fact like, oh, they've got a returning starter at quarterback or whatever. And, you know, the returning starter is not always good. So that's not always a positive. But I do think on the offensive line, Corcoran's starting experience does matter. I think the fact that he's been with Coach Raiola for multiple years matters. I think that the fact that he's been with some of these guys previously and been on lines with some of these guys previously matters. I also think that he needs to be better than he was previously. That's fair. I think that's a totally fair point to be made. I also think he will be better. I keep bringing up Bryce Benhart, but this is a dude no one wanted to see last year. No one. We were desperate to find someone other than Bryce Benhart to play right tackle. We were desperate. Anyone other than Bryce Benhart. Fast forward a year, and we were so grateful that he decided to forego the NFL draft and his professional football prospects to return for another year at Nebraska. Now, I know he transformed his body and he was doing a bunch of other things, and that's fine. He also was being coached by Donovan Raiola for an extra year and being coached in a system that made sense for what Raiola's scheme was on the offensive line. There's no reason that can't be the case with Turner Corcoran. Turner Corcoran and Bryce Benhart were very similar level of recruits. They have I think, similar level of talent based on their physical abilities. And I think that's something that matters in this situation. Again, he needs to be better than he has been at this point. He's put some bad tape out. I get it. I think there's a place for him to be the one that takes the big step up this year. Now, obviously, you hope a bunch of guys do, right? You hope Ben Scott takes another leap. You hope Justin Evans takes a leap as a young guy. You hope Micah Mazuka takes a leap as a transfer. There's a bunch of guys you hope get better, but Corcoran's the one you look at and you go, okay, that guy has to get better, and that's fine. I agree. He needs to be better than he was.
That's fine.
I also think he not only will be, but has gotten better than he was. Otherwise, I don't know why he would have been working with the ones over Teddy Prohaska. I'm under the assumption he's already made those improvements. That's why he was working with the ones. Maybe that's too much of an assumption to make. Maybe Teddy was, just having a rough start to camp or whatever before the injury. I don't know. But I only know that Turner was working with the ones, and there had to be a reason for that. It can either be he was playing well or Teddy wasn't. That's to me a 50%. It's a coin flip that Turner Corcoran's already made the improvements we're talking about him having needed to make in order for this thing to work on the offensive line. I think that's reasonable, and I think that's a reasonable ask for Nebraska to make on an offensive line that, again, has shown under Raiola. Now, it's a short track record. I get that, but has shown in their track record with Raiola that they're going to improve. And maybe not just Corcoran, maybe some of those younger guys as well. I would assume some of those younger guys as well. Wanted to get back to, I talked about quarterbacks there for just a second. I did want to get back to the quarterbacks in the Big Ten because, as I'm kind of going through the Big Ten schedule, I'm going through kind of starting to mentally prepare myself for who I think is going to be good, who I think might have some regression. And so I start thinking about who their quarterbacks are, right? I start thinking about who they've got lining up under center. I start thinking about what that might look like, how they fit systems, things like that. Michigan's a really good example. I have no idea what to expect from Alex Orji. That's going to be a very different, and we're assuming it's Alex Orji, but that's going to be a very different version of Michigan than we saw last year. Maybe it reverts more to kind of the type of offense we saw with Cade McNamara when he was at Michigan. Maybe it reverts more to the type of offense we saw when Sharon Moore was acting as head coach a couple games in the season. I think Penn State was a game where they kind of just ground that thing out. Maybe that's what it looks like with Alex Orji, and maybe he's a good fit for that. What I do know is it's going to look a lot different. So when I look at Michigan and I look at not only the change at head coach, but change at quarterback and philosophically what that could mean, you're going from a guy that apparently was the savior in Minnesota after one preseason game to a guy that we don't even for sure know that he is starting yet in Alex Orji. That's one that I look at with a lot of interest One that just got named the starter this week, Tyler Van Dyke at Wisconsin. That's a guy where, there's this list from 24/7. We love our friends at 24/7. This was from the national guys, but it puts Tyler Van Dyke as the 7th best quarterback in the Big Ten this year. And maybe that's right. Probably not going to quibble over the number too much. Maybe seems a little high for me. But what I do know is it's been a while since Tyler Van Dyke looked like a guy that you would feel really, really good about. That was probably in 2021, his redshirt freshman year or COVID freshman year. I don't know if it was a redshirt or just a COVID year. It's hard to tell these days. But that's a guy that you look at and you go, it's been a couple years since he's been a guy that you'd feel really good about. So maybe it's in there still. It probably is somewhere. But maybe defense has kind of caught on to how he liked to operate, and he's just regressed to who he's going to be. I don't know, but I do know that Wisconsin's going to need him to be good. And I also know that the pressure in Wisconsin is probably not as patient with Luke Fickell as Nebraska is with Matt Rule right now. I think we talked about this last week, or I might have been talking with somebody about it off air. It's kind of hard to keep track sometimes when you're talking about football pretty much just all the time. But I think Wisconsin started in a much better place than Nebraska did when the two respective coaches took over. And so I think the expectations for them to be better faster are pretty heavy. I think they were pretty disappointed last year with how that thing went. And I don't know if Tyler Van Dyke fixes that. I don't know if he is the, is he better than, was it Tanner Mordecai last year? I don't know. Mordecai at least had experience in that type of offense. He I believe it was SMU, and was pretty familiar with the concepts and what they were trying to do there. Maybe the change is good for Tyler Van Dyke, but I don't look at that as a given. I have a lot of question marks about that situation with Wisconsin and their quarterback room. One of the ones I'm most interested in, and not just because I put a ton of stock into the Iowa over, but Cade McNamara is a really, really interesting one. There's been some reports out of camp that it's not going well, which, surprise, surprise, there are reports out of camp that Iowa's offense is bad. But that's a guy that I expect to perform better than Iowa had at quarterback last year. If for some reason he's unable to do that, which I don't even know how you can walk upright and be worse at quarterback than Iowa was last year, but let's pretend that that's a thing that could happen. And if he's worse last year or this year than the combination of him and Deacon Hill were last year, I still feel good about the over the 7.5 because their schedule is cake, but they're definitely going to fall short of 10. And that I think would be disappointing for Iowa this year. If I'm Iowa and I don't win 10 games this year, I'd be pretty disappointed, I think. This is a team that has, I think, the defense and the schedule to win 10 games, and that's not a crazy expectation. Coming up next, we're going to stick with Big Ten football, talk a little Purdue with Tom Dienhart. DB will be joining us any minute now. That's Shane producing. I'm Ravi Lulla. This is Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Sawinski in motion. O'Connell, there you bring a blitz. There's a pass caught. Payne Durham dragging a tackler close to the goal line. What's the call? Is he in? Yes! Touchdown, Boilermakers. Payne Durham with the touchdown reception. As Purdue beat the all-out blitz, Aiden O'Connell took a hit and got the throw away anyway.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's D-Beat. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We are joined now by Tom Dienhart. He covers Purdue football for On3. Tom, how are you this morning?
Doing pretty good, fellas. Off day today here in West Lafayette.
God, you get those. What are off days in the fall, Tom? Were you like, wow, this is pretty cool, or is that kind of the way that the schedule's gone so far?
It's been busy in camp, Damon. Yeah. You can imagine. They started July 31st, Wednesday. So yesterday was the 2-week, anniversary, if you will, of camp. They had 12 practices, one scrimmage, and if you ask Ryan Walters, I think the thing he's most happy about is there have been no catastrophic injuries. And I know that's not the case for Nebraska.
Let me ask you something with Coach Walters. Like I always say, the first thing that I say about him is, gosh, he seems like such a good guy. He's a nice guy. Like, I think he's for the program. And sometimes when you don't talk about acumen or X's and O's or winning, then that can kind of be the death sentence. Am I okay starting with him being a good guy, or does that get ratcheted up a little bit in West Lafayette?
I think he's a good guy, and he's a smart coach. I think he checks a lot of boxes. He just, inexperienced as being a head coach, obviously, Damon. I mean, this guy was born always blows me away to think about this. He was born in 1986.
Mm.
He's about 37 years old, 38. Just had his first year as a head coach. He's learning on the job at a Big Ten school, so there you go. But he's undaunted. You know what youth is like. You can do anything, and I think that sort of attitude permeates his staff. It's a pretty young staff, guys.
Mm.
A lot of youth, and they don't think anything can't be accomplished. You need that at a place like Purdue, and they've really flipped the roster over. This year alone, there's 37 newcomers. So 4-8 last year, guys. You know, getting to a bowl this year is going to be tough. You saw them pick to finish last. I think that's really hacked off Walters and everybody, so they're motivated. I'll tell you what, guys, September 28th, Nebraska at Purdue, the Big Ten opener. That is a huge game for the Boilermakers. I'm sure for Nebraska, too.
Mm.
Tom, before we get to the newcomers, I did want to stay on Ryan Walters and that young coaching staff for just a second. What are, we talk a lot about players making kind of leaps or improvements from year one to year two. Are there any areas with Ryan Walters and that young coaching staff that you would like to see them make sort of leaps in how they perform from year one to year two?
I think it's one side of the ball. I think it's the defensive side of the ball. Got to get better there.
That's Kevin Kane, right?
Well, yeah, Kevin Kane.
Yeah.
Good guy too, man. But that's Ryan Walters is a defensive guy, right? He's a defensive coordinator at Illinois. That's where he earned his chops, and in defense at Missouri, and at Memphis, Arizona, a lot of places. So that's his bailiwick. That's his expertise. Guys, they were last in the Big Ten in points allowed per game last year. The only team to allow over 30 points a game. It was feast or famine. They made a big play or they gave up a big play. They got to get better. They got to mute the bust and not allow as many busts. But you know what, guys? It's a high risk, high reward defense. They're going to play a lot of man coverage. They're going to come after you. They basically have 5 linemen. They're asking your 5 linemen to block their 5 linemen. They like their chances with one-on-one matchups. Sort of is what it is. And I think when you have a defense like that, your offense has to make up some ground, right, and score some points. But again, the defense has to make strides, like I said, and the biggest stride, like I said, is limiting big plays this year.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, because it's such a safety-rich conference. There are some thoroughbreds across the board. And Dylan has held his own. He was the freshman phenom. He runs that deal back there. Who does he need to get help from up front to have a similar sophomore campaign?
He's the real deal.
Oh, yeah.
I think he's only going to be here 3 years, and he could be a first-round draft choice. But Damon, he needs help from number 4, Kydron Jenkins. Kydron Jenkins was a rush-in last year. He was number 3 in the Big Ten in sacks and TFLs. They moved him to inside linebacker. He's going to be able to roam the field. He's still going to rush. He's going to blitz. He's going to line up off the edge on third downs. But he's got to be a stud this year again. That's the big guy. And there's one other defensive end to watch. Number 15, true sophomore named Will Helt, 6'6", 265 pounds. He already looks like a pro getting off the bus. And he flashed last year as a true freshman. He looks like he's ready to break out. And guys, they need to start off the edge because if you remember, Nick Scorton, the number 1 sack man in the Big Ten last year, bolted West Lafayette for Texas A&M. So we do need someone to come off that edge to wreak havoc and get some sacks this year.
You talk about feast or famine. You only give up a 54% completion percentage, but like you alluded to, the scoreboard lit up like, like a ping pong game. It's incredible how sometimes it looks so difficult to get something done, and they play a 3-3-5-2, which is why I pay so much attention to them. But what is the difference between such a low completion percentage and lighting up the scoreboard?
A lot of times I think it's you're giving up big plays. You're not making opponents earn it. And that's something that Iowa's so good at, right? You guys know that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Grindy.
Still Parker. Bemba don't break. He's going to dare you to execute 10 or 12 plays to score and not make a mistake, not mess it up, not turn it over, not get a penalty to blow a drive. He's going to dare you to do that. And a lot of times offenses can't do it. And then they get that stop. He's not going to take a lot of chances with man coverage and blitzes. He's going to pick his spots and be more judicious about it. So I think that's the biggest difference. You talked about the completion percentage pretty low last year. Pretty solid number, 54. But again, you think the points allowed per game maybe would reflect that, but they don't. Again, gets back to teams being able to score too easily on big plays. You got to make people earn stuff.
We're talking with Tom Dienhart. He covers Purdue football for On3. Tom, you mentioned 37 newcomers. Obviously, you've got some returners at key spots like Hudson Carr and Devin Maccabee, but who are some of the newcomers you look at as having to absolutely make an impact this year?
Well, there's one guy who's kind of a newcomer in quotes, probably going to be their best receiver. A kid who got here last year, blew out a knee in camp and had to miss the entire year. He's a Florida Atlantic transfer, Jamal Edrin.
Mm-hmm.
He's supposed to be their alpha wideout, a big kid, 6'3", 215. He's going to have to be a stud this year. So that's one sort of newcomer to watch. They got 4 kids from Georgia, if you can believe it. All 4 should help them. And I think their best cornerback is going to be one of these Georgia kids, Nyland Green. He's going to have to be a shutdown type corner. He looks like a pro physically, 6'2", 200-pound cornerback that can run. We'll see if he can deliver. They got an end from Georgia named C.J. Madden they like a lot. And a wide receiver, too, C.J. Smith, could be their second best guy. He's supposed to be the fastest player on the team, quote-unquote Olympic caliber speed. So those Georgia kids got to step up, too. And we'll watch their tight end, Max Clare. He got hurt last year in September, missed the rest of the year. I think he could be special. He could be an all-Big Ten tight end, a big kid. Can run, and I think Hudson Card's going to really look for Max Clare, number 86, on third downs.
Yeah, you can't see my surprise face with Purdue and a good tight end. I'm shocked. You're right, though. I'll be curious to see Coach Carter, Sam Carter, who's got your corners with some new talent back there on the edges. But let me get to the guy that's come up a couple times, Hudson Card. What's the relationship and where do you think it goes with Graham Harrell and Hudson Card, who a lot of people, there was some murmurs last year that some felt like he may be the best get of all the new quarterbacks in new places last year, with another year under his belt with Graham Harrell.
That's the big key right there, another year under his belt under Graham Harrell. And that's what people are banking on, that year of experience, that 1 year under his belt in the offense, in the system with Coach Harrell. It's just natural progression, right? You're going to get better. Logically, you think, the longer you're in a system. And this is Hudson Card's last year. The hope is that comfort level is higher now. And he was solid last year. I'll be honest, he wasn't great. He was solid. He didn't really benefit from a strong line. He was under a lot of duress. I mean, he was hurt, guys. You hate to use injury as an excuse, but he played banged up about half the year, at least 5 games. Almost didn't play at Iowa. Missed the game at Northwestern. So I think that contributed maybe some of his performances last year. But he's got to be a stud. That always goes without saying, right? That's obvious. Your mom knows quarterbacks have to play well if you want to have a good team. And hey, guys, look at the Big Ten quarterbacks. I know there's 18 teams this year, but on the surface, it doesn't look like it's a laundry list of studs, right?
Yeah.
I think Dylan Gabriel leads the way. We'll see how good the kid at Penn State is. You got the true freshman there, but just think in your head, Tyler Van Dyke, Kansas State kid at Ohio State. Maryland's got a new guy. Rutgers has got the kid from Minnesota. So my point is, Hudson Card, I think it's fair to say, could be one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten, if not one of the top 3 quarterbacks. And again, they're going to need it because when you get a chance, if you get bored, look at Purdue's schedule this year. I don't think you'll find any team with a tougher schedule in the Big Ten.
Tom, just about 90 seconds left. Maccabee's coming out party was against Nebraska, I think, a year and a half ago. A lot of things were expected of him last year with the new body type, and it didn't listen, I'm giving it time because running backs need help with the offensive line, but how critical is he to what this offense wants to do, considering he's shown flashes?
Big. Hey, if you want to surprise yourself, Purdue led the Big Ten in rushing in conference games and finished number 3 overall. So they could run the ball. Maccabee was solid. He was kind of banged up last year.
Is that what it was?
He's gotten big. We talked to him the other day. He's noticed to be a little bit thicker. He's up to 200.
So he's the old Maccabee now.
He doesn't look. Man, if you saw Devin Maccabee, you think he's just a student.
Right.
He doesn't have one. He doesn't have a Damon Benning body.
Oh, neither does DB.
But, he's a great kid. He's sort of unmoved by all of this. You would not know he's a star. He really doesn't care he's a star. He loves to work on his hot rod cars. He fixes players' cars. He's a big gearhead. Rides a little BMX bicycle around, but just a real fresh breath of fresh air, if you will. And just the most unlikely start. A fun story. Walk on. Allison has a chance to lead their guys. Maybe he's obviously one of the top rushers ever. And guys, he's going to try to be the first 1,000-yard rusher of Purdue since, get this, 2008. 40 sheets. I don't think there's any team, FBS team, that catches a longer drought without a 1,000-yard rusher than Purdue. 2008 was the last time Purdue had a 1,000-yard rusher. I still had a full head of hair back in 2008. That's a long way.
That's Tom Dienhart. He covers Purdue football for On 3. Tom, we appreciate the time. I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
Thanks, TD.
Thank you, fellas.
We got more Hurrdat Sports Radio coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar exterior stage, and reminding you that if you're out driving, getting your way to work, make sure you wear your seatbelts. It prevents injuries and saves lives, but only if you wear it properly. Make it click. This message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. DB, what's up?
I'm just trying to make it.
You trying to make it another day?
Yeah, just a day. Yeah, I am. I'm gonna practice out of the way, man. My voice.
I'll say you must have got after it today.
No, well, I gotta get used to it again.
Yeah,
right.
like condition it.
Yep, and I got to get back to the basics with my Ricolas and honey and all that.
That's something not a lot of people think about when you're coaching.
Yeah,
is that first week or two back? I wasn't a big yeller, but even for me, it was a little. I was more just like quietly sharing my disappointment. But
hey, how that quarterback? Am I misremembering? Didn't people love the Hudson card with Graham Merrill?
Yes, that was a real thing last year.
Yeah,
that was one they thought. I think a lot of people thought it was the best fit between coordinator and new quarterback.
And they tried to run the ball a little bit more than I think Purdue, than I think people thought. I mean, but I think Maccabee rushed for 800
ish, 860,
about 4.5 a carry.
Yeah.
But remember going in, it was like, ooh, Maccabee could be, he had the new body and he was kind of fit.
Yeah.
Because remember when he diced Nebraska up in West Lafayette 2 years ago
with a couple C's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, how does this guy pulling this off?
Yeah, he was a big dude. And then he was running away from people.
And Tracy got carries last year for them. I think he was second in carries and Card had the next most. So they're complimenting of the run game. I still think, and not to go back to the PBC Pinnacle Bank Championship, but I still was a little surprised that you would be more okay with a loss at home to Rutgers than a loss on the road to Purdue.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I'm still okay with it.
Yeah, first roadie, maybe dealing with success.
I get it. I mean, I would get it
if you get off to a good start.
Yeah, if they start off 4-0, I get it. I get how it could happen. I just think Rutgers is going to be better this year, and I haven't got.
But sometimes it's not about that. Sometimes it's about where you catch somebody in the schedule.
No, but I mean, for me, about how I would feel about the loss.
Yeah,
I would feel better about Rutgers because I think they're going to be better. Not that I think it's more likely or less.
So
likely.
like at first blush, if I said, "Oh man, Nebraska lost to Purdue on the road," versus, "Hey man, Nebraska lost to Rutgers at home."
I mean, full disclosure, it's going to depend on how each of those teams ends up being at the end of the season. Like if I'm looking back at it, for me, it's going to depend on how those teams. So if
that is such a safe way to play it.
No, that's just how I feel though. Like because I mean, like the Colorado is a great example of this, both against Nebraska last year and TCU.
And I don't want to shoot down the theory. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so the Colorado TCU game felt like a huge win for Colorado in the moment because TCU played in the national championship game the year before, right? We knew they were going to be worse. We didn't know what they were going to be though. By the end of the season, you look at it, you're like, it's nice to win your first game of the Dion era, whatever. But you look at it, it was an exciting game. But you look at it and you go, that's not really a great win.
Yeah, but in the same vein, Colorado's a vastly different team in Week 10 than they are in Week 2.
100%.
So, like,
I get it.
I'm just a big stay in the moment guy because injuries happen, morale happens. Like, it's different. I think so.
It is for sure. And I guess my point was in the discussion last week and kind of continuing is if I'm looking at big picture and I'm getting 8-4 because this is where this started, right? Is we were guaranteed Citrus Bowl and 8-4, right?
I did like the fact that Tony bailed you out because he said it real succinctly. He was like, I think Ravi's trying to explain 8 wins and how you get there and not have it look ugly.
Yes.
Otherwise,
100%.
You have to be talking about 9-3.
Yeah.
And I was like, got it.
100%. Yeah. There's only
tip your cap to TG. Say thanks, Tony. I
appreciate you, Tony.
It's good looking up. He always has your back now. Last 2 months, man, this dude is like
they're
filling in all the Ravi blanks.
In order to get to 8-4 and not have an extended losing streak at the end of the season, which is what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah. No, I hear you.
You have to lose either Purdue or Rutgers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't go 7-0 and then lose 4 of your last 5 and be like, I feel great about 8-4, right? Because you wouldn't. We've sort of been there before in a similar spot with Riley, where they start 7-0, you lose 3 of your last 5, and you don't feel great about it.
It's like we have moved on past that season, and that was like Nebraska's last.
It was their last bowl game. It was their last decent season,
right?
It was. I mean, they were top 10 ranked in the country,
and we were miserable the week because we just felt the whole way through it was fool's gold.
Yeah, but guess what? I would love some fool's gold right now.
Yeah,
I'd be thrilled with 7-0 fool's gold, but I won't be thrilled losing 4 of the last 5 if that's how it plays out, right? So that's all it is for me. Would I be like, and we're talking degrees of separation here.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be thrilled with a Rutgers loss and devastated by a Purdue loss, right? Just top of like, if I think Rutgers is better than Purdue, which I do, I'd rather lose to the better team.
Yeah.
And Nebraska hasn't gotten so good at home yet that I'm like, oh, they can't lose at home. You know what I mean? Like, they haven't defended their home turf well enough that I'm like, they can't lose a home game.
Yeah, but I'm just telling you, though, you stub your toe at home to Rutgers, and Nebraska isn't where they need to be, right? Because Rutgers will be in a similar vein. They will look, and I hadn't even done the defensive statistics, but we heard when we did our Rutgers preview, their play-by-play guy was like, listen, man, they don't turn teams over enough. Got to get off the field on third down, and I'm like, they don't get after the quarterback enough, and I'm like, but they're still good defensively. I'm like, oh, that's Nebraska. That sound like? That's Nebraska, right? Like that. Those are all the things that Nebraska's working on. So I just think if we're having the kind of season from a projection standpoint that you want to have, that I want to have, that Nebraska has to win those games at home. They just do. Coin flip games at home have to be won by Nebraska. Otherwise, these conversations, it's like, because if we can't win those games on the road, I can't begin to get my mind around pulling off an upset on the road.
Yeah.
Which at some point you're going to have to be able to do too. So when I look at the quarterback play within the conference, I think that's where you have to start. Like, is Calic Manis is all of a sudden that he's going to be the answer? They say he's an upgrade from Whitsitt. Okay. We'll see.
Yeah.
Right. I have no idea what's going on in Iowa. I listen to any sort of media availability they have. I'm trying to find it online. I'm going to my either Kakert or Doctorman or somebody. Right there, they haven't even remotely tipped their hand at a starting quarterback yet. It's been very reluctant. I would not assume that it's McNamara just yet. Go to
some of the few things we have heard out of Iowa is that it's not going great for McNamara.
I mean, is Van Dyke, is he going to have
better than Mordecai?
What we couldn't get out of Jeff Sims? We're a guy that's had a propensity to turn the ball over. Is he all of a sudden not going to turn the ball over?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah,
that's what you're
and a guy that hasn't really been who you kind of thought he would be since 2021.
Yeah. What will Ohio State's offense look like if they don't settle in and they play two guys? Because for all intents and purposes, I think they're playing two guys.
Yeah.
Day doesn't say what he said the other day about Julian Sands without that big, like, okay. Like, there may be something to that. So
and I haven't really been sold on the Will Howard thing since it happened.
No, I know. I get it. But I'm giving the benefit of the doubt to the relationship between OCs, and if it's plural.
Yeah.
Right? Because Day is heavy-handed offensively, but 100%. He does have a ton of respect for Chip.
Yeah.
But Howard is a Chip Kelly kind of guy.
Yes.
So I'm going to give that the benefit of the doubt. UCLA ran the ball pretty well, Chip's last couple of years, quietly at UCLA, better than I think.
Yeah, like with DTR.
Yeah, man, they ran the ball.
Yeah. They were a physical team. That's the thing that they never got credit for when he was at Oregon, is they were a pretty physical football team.
So I just look at the quarterback situations around Nebraska's going to play a young guy. So it's just a lot of unknowns. At least for me.
The Ohio State one really intrigues me because
do you really know how they're going to play at SC?
No.
Not very good sample size.
No.
And they got a big one early.
And I think at some point, I know they changed defensive coordinators and all that. And at some point, does Lincoln Riley ever ask himself, am I part of the problem here?
Why would he ask himself that?
On the defensive side of the ball?
Ooh, I don't know about that.
Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, maybe.
Do you even ask the question? Because it's been so bad, pretty consistent. The defense have been pretty consistently struggling with Lincoln Riley.
I mean, I guess it's kind of, I think I kind of have the cheat code because I talked to Coach White about the courting at SC. And so I think I know what Lincoln Riley wants.
Okay.
Now, it is up to him to make it happen. But I don't think he's a guy that's like, just get the ball back from my offense.
Okay, that's fair.
You know what I mean?
You know what I mean? I think of him.
Yeah, but I don't. I don't think it's like that. Unless there was just such reverence for White and wanting him to be in SoCal that
he was pitching him.
You say things that you don't really mean, which I don't.
Wouldn't be the first time. And
yeah, I think I'm gonna give the benefit of the doubt.
That's fine.
There, right?
I don't have any reason not to,
and I don't have enough conviction to be like, "Hey, man, I'm right." Like I'm just going by the feel of the conversation.
Totally fair.
So,
because I think the perception of Lincoln Riley is
but I do
just
think
give me the ball back.
I do think D'' is
legit,
is an upgrade.
Yeah,
and you start looking at, look at the coordinators in this conference, the defensive coordinators in this conference. It's a big boy league.
Oh, 100%.
So, I think you better be able to play. You better be able to play good defense. I think there's pressure on Tosh in Oregon.
Yeah.
Oh, I do, because the repetitiveness of physicality, you can't simulate that.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to train in such a way where time doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's not like
it's one thing to be a physical team in a not physical conference. It's another team to be.
If there's only if there's only Oregon State, Utah, and Oregon, right, that play that way at the line of scrimmage,
three, you can kind of take.
Yeah, if
not weeks off, but if you get breaks.
If the bulks of the team that you play in the trenches
if
like
you're
that,
going Iowa,
and
Wisconsin,
they don't even have to be
Michigan.
Spectacular. It's just rigor.
Yeah, it's just
you don't understand how to push through rigor until you go through rigor.
Just a beating, right?
Right.
Like it's not.
So I hope there's something to that, because I think that's the biggest thing that Nebraska learned under this new staff last year was, hey, man, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? We don't want to be limping to the finish line. We want to be fresh because it is a big boy league. Playing Iowa at the end of the year at 6:30 in Iowa City.
Not for everyone.
You already know what type of party that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what you're not afforded the luxury to do is to fast forward and be like, hey, man, I just got to get through these first 11 games. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that in this league.
No, you can do that.
And so I think coaches have to you have to negotiate that with depth.
Yeah, if you're Oregon, you've got one that people don't think about, like Illinois beats on you.
Mm-hmm.
Like Illinois is a physical
gap scheme, G scheme. Like you watch their run game.
Yeah.
You have to be prepared to play that a certain way.
Yeah, they are,
and Bielema, like he's one of the best in the business at teaching it.
Yeah, they're gonna beat your head in. Oregon's got Oregon State again this year.
Do we like what's going on in Illinois with the quarterback? Like the quarterback spot in the Big Ten is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm not totally sold on Dylan Gabriel either. Like the numbers, we said this off air a little bit. The numbers are gonna be there.
Yeah, and I'm already on record with. I like Gabriel. I don't love Gabriel. And
that's like
getting inside the numbers.
Yeah.
Like he did the bulk of his work last year. I think I'm misremembering. I do know against the two top 20 defenses that he played, the two best teams they played at the time, Kansas and Okie State, he was 1 touchdown, 2 picks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was weird because he still completed 74% of his passes, but it wasn't productive in terms of generating points. So I don't know. He threw 16 of his 30 touchdowns in 5 games.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The ability to play catch vertically in this league in crucial moments is going to separate teams that are looking at the 12-team playoff and not. I'm not talking about playing pitch and catch on RPOs, right? I'm not talking about tunnel screens and speed outs, right? Those are great. Like,
but you're talking about like 3rd and 8.
Yeah, I'm talking 3rd and 8, hitting a skinny, or completing an over route on like a 3rd and 12, where you got to quell the crowd and
you have to convert.
Right, like those are the things that I'm talking about that I think are the difference.
Where you're like, hey, I have to pick up a first down right now, and I can't count on a missed tackle.
Didn't matter how some of these, like Stetson Bennett, for all the hand wringing we did over what JJ McCarthy wasn't. At 3rd and 9, man, dude made plays, right? And then all of a sudden you realize that Roman Wilson was on your team.
Yeah.
Or Loveland was a really, really good tight end. So those are the guys that when you get in meaningful games late in October and early November, man, it ain't 3rd and 4 RPOs when it's cute and fun and, 1st and 10 when you got a 2-way go. I'm talking about 3rd and 9 nut cutting time. those are the guys. And I don't know if there's a ton of proven commodities. I mean, do I like right now? You ask me, do I trust Van Dyke 3rd and 9?
No.
Yeah, and on
do I trust
Saturday night in Madison when Nebraska's there?
Do I trust Drew Aller?
Another guy whose numbers, like, wouldn't you think Penn State we'd having different if a guy goes 26-2,
you think we were having different conversations about Penn State?
Yeah, prolific offense, but people still say, I don't know about Drew.
That's because people watched it,
right? But so
you know what I mean?
So my point is, but I would be tickled with 26-2.
Oh, without a doubt. But Penn State goals and Nebraska goals right now are not in the same. We're having different conversations.
Yeah, I know. I mean,
you know what I mean?
Like it's incredible the scrutiny that
Penn State gets.
Oh.
Because right now, I mean,
but
Penn State's winning 10 games a year, basically. That's the average.
Yeah, but
that we did.
Again, when you're in the preseason top 10, as much as they are, and I think the last 8 years it's been 5 or 6, maybe. Like a lot is expected of you.
100%.
Right? But they have won back-to-back years of 7 games in the conference. It's just that those 2 L's
were the 2 that they needed the most.
So Ohio State and Michigan.
So yes.
26-2 for them is probably like, man, where were we on like 3rd and 9 with our back against the wall on the 22-yard line or something like that?
26-2 is like, where did that get us? Where did 26-2 get us?
So I understand that fully, but
whereas like if Dylan Raiola goes 26-2, Nebraska 100% gets to their 8 wins, probably 9.
Yeah,
and we're having a totally different conversation. Like the end games are different.
Yeah, if Nebraska doesn't turn the ball over and they're generating 26 touchdowns via the pass,
yeah, they're fine. They're going to be
absolutely.
But it's just weird how like it's a school like Penn State can't say that.
Yeah, no,
it's mind-boggling, which is why the game is more than just stats.
Yes, one, it's again just the context of what is needed at Penn State this year versus what is needed at Nebraska this year is pretty dramatically different. But your point about the quarterbacks, and I guess Tom was making this point as well, it is, so the top 24/7 put out a list a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah. Of top quarterbacks. I saw
Number 1 was Gabriel. We both, again, the numbers are going to be there. Is he going to be the guy you need him to be?
Let's put him on, yeah.
Number 2 is Drew Aller. We just had a conversation about Drew Aller. The numbers are going to be there. Is he going to be who you need him to be?
Here's a better way to look at that.
Yeah.
Are Penn State fans, do you think, championing that?
Excited that
yeah.
Or do you think Penn State fans would make an argument that he's won? Maybe that's the better question.
I don't think so.
I don't either.
I don't think so.
That's my point about Aller.
I think with Drew, I think they're thinking, I think the natural inclination, maybe we got to pull enough PSU fans. I think they're thinking, I think the first thing that they would say is, yeah, but.
Yeah.
I do.
I agree.
I think they'd say, yeah, but.
That's the deal with Aller, which is that's your guy at number 2. And he probably is.
That's fine.
No, but he probably is number 2. But that goes to your point about the quarterback play in the conference maybe not being as rock solid as some of the names would indicate. Because you go from Dylan Gabriel, who we both have our hesitations on, to Drew Aller, who I agree Penn State fans would go, yeah, but with. And then you go Will Howard, who we've had this conversation about already.
Who may not be the full-time starter.
Yeah, may not be the full-time starter. I do think the amount that Will Howard plays will tell you who has more control of that offense. If Will Howard is,
I don't know, man,
more full-time starter
Julian
than
is
not,
that, I'm pretty, remember, Kelly's coach Mariota. It ain't like he needs a certain kind of guy. He's had dynamic dudes. So I don't agree with that at all. I think they want to win games and there's a lot of pressure. So I think the guy that gives them the best chance to win. This is my opinion. I think they're playing that guy. I don't think it tells me anything about control except for we got big games to win and we're going with the guy that does that.
The reason
and right on cue.
The reason I say that is I think this is my judgment. I don't have any information on this. My judgment would be, okay, if you've got Ryan Day, who's tended to play quarterbacks in a certain way, you've got Chip Kelly, who's had some versatile different guys, but plays a lot more running quarterbacks. Each of those guys probably thinks the guy that does their thing best gives them the best chance to win. So it's not like, oh, I want to play Will Howard, even though I think Julian Sand gives us the best chance to win. It's, I want to play Will Howard because I think my version of this offense gives us the best chance to win.
Yeah, I think we're overthinking it. Like Julian Sand could play his version.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, that's possible. And then if he can, then yeah, that Julian Sand probably ends up being the guy. And then you go, I don't want to say you fall off a cliff, But number 4 is Miller Moss, who's played like no football. Like you get to guys with
highly touted. And the last time we saw him, it was
great.
Whew.
But it's one football game.
I do.
Football.
But so I want to take myself back to that moment.
Okay.
When Miller Moss was getting the start in that bowl game and Caleb Williams wasn't playing, what did we say?
That USC wouldn't have a chance because
let's see how they do now without the guy that saved their bacon all year. Because that's pretty much what we said.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think for a lot of the year it was accurate.
It's extremely quarterback. Like he saved their bacon a ton.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to give the devil his due, right? Because we said that going in, and then we watched it and we're like, oh, fudge. And it looked like they really skipped the beat.
Yeah.
So I think we got to keep that right there.
That's fair.
You know what I mean?
That's a fair thing to bring up.
Because I think talent-wise, like
I also
a talent. He can spin it now.
Have a hard time knowing what to do with bowl games in terms of.
And now if you'd been like, hey, man, DB, like 1 game sample size, that's high in this conference relative to how good I think the conference could be. Because that's really what you're saying without saying it.
Yeah.
You're like, how is Moss this high? And he's only played 1 game when the conference could be this good, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, if you're
come on, other quarterbacks.
Yeah, if you're expecting to have 4 teams in the playoff, Miller Moss on a team that we don't expect to make the playoff probably can't be the 4th best quarterback in the league.
I could understand that rationale.
Like
that. I would probably say because he would say it makes it right. But that's how I would think about it.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's awful high for a team that may not make the kind of run that they're making.
Yeah, and I don't think most people do expect them to be making the run in terms of playoff.
Well,
like some teams, except for our guys at
I was going to say,
Analytical.
Dave and Adam could be beating their chest about their models because they love SC.
Yeah, the models love SC for sure. But then that's what I mean, though. After those first 3 guys, it's like, okay, proven production. Even if you've got some buts about it, and you've got 1 game sample size.
And Van Dyke was 7, right?
Van Dyke was 7. Will Rogers is 5. That's a guy with a ton of production at Mississippi State. Kind of a weird year last year with the change in coaching and everything like that with Leach and everything happening there. So you wonder, okay, can he be the guy he was the first 3 years at Mississippi State? Is last year the real guy? That's going to be an interesting one, too. Like, there's a lot of buts. Because number 6, our guy, Dylan Raiola.
I probably would put Card ahead of Rogers.
You think so?
Year 2 with Graham.
Rogers had a lot of production, though.
Oh, I know.
Man, that's interesting. We'll continue this Big Ten quarterback
first
discussion
blush
coming up. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
To this day.
We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla, live here at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, where you can come actually hang out with us in a couple weeks. On Friday before the UTEP game, we will be having our live pregame breakfast presented by EP Foundation Repair. Make sure you reserve your seat at Eventbrite. Just search for Hurrdat Sports Radio at eventbrite.com and reserve your seat. We've got breakfast. We'll have drinks here as well, which you'll just pay for your breakfast once you get here. But make sure you get signed up. We'll be doing 4 of these throughout the year, and it'll be great to have live shows back here at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill.
That's how T. Mose feels about Lincoln Riley.
Well, he's an Oklahoma fan, so that's
you like how he minced words.
I think that's the general consensus of Oklahoma fans.
See, and he's in a precarious spot because I didn't mean to like make this up if it wasn't a thing at Big Ten Media Days, but I think people treated him like kind of a hostile witness. It wasn't as much as delivery as much as I feel like he can't shake the dodging of the SEC rep.
Yeah.
So I think he has to win in this conference.
I think that is a thing that people think about him with.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so I did want to get back to the quarterbacks here because you said something on the way out that you thought you would take Hudson Card over Will Rogers.
I think.
I struggle with that a little bit.
Well, I probably know why. You like Rogers' productivity.
Yeah, super productive.
Yeah.
But especially before last year. He only played 8 games last year. Wasn't bad, but wasn't what he'd been the previous years. And Hudson Card just doesn't have that much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you want to make the argument of you have a better idea of, or you think you have a better idea of what Graham Harrell looks like with Hudson Card in year 2 of that offense, and you know how those offenses have looked with Graham Harrell in the past, like I could make that argument. I just have a really hard time overlooking a ton of productivity from Will Rogers.
Yeah, the thing about it is I look at the situation he's in too.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't know what to make of Washington.
Again,
really.
Year 2 with Harrell and Card. Color me curious.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
They in totality, they ran the ball as a group better than I think most thought they would. And Card had I get some of it as scrambles, but 93 rushing attempts. I'm almost positive he was second on their team in rush attempts ahead of Tracy. So I just look at that situation. Now we'll see. Fish has
been pretty good with quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And obviously Will Rogers is a guy that's got a ton of experience.
He wasn't electric last year.
No, last year last year was not a great year for him. But the 2 years before that, he goes 36 touchdowns, 9 picks, 35 touchdowns, 8 picks, 4,700 yards, 3,900 yards. He was highly, highly productive his last 2 years under Leach before getting switched. And then he only played 8 games last year. But
a lot of quarterbacks are highly, highly, highly productive.
That they are
under Leach.
That's fair. They really are. I don't know. I have a hard time, but it's not like,
I know, splitting hairs.
Well, and it's not like Harrell and Leach run totally different.
Raiola at 6 is high.
Yeah. They're projecting.
So it's it's about the projection of talent.
Which is why you can go Miller Moss at 4.
Yeah.
Which, if you said this off the air, I think if Miller Moss ends up being at 4, you think USC ends up being
SC's pretty good.
Now, you could make the argument
that it's just an offensive thing.
Well, yeah, because Caleb Williams would have been 1 last year. And
SC wasn't good.
SC wasn't very good.
Yeah.
Right. So
I understand.
I do think it's dramatic.
But I think
you're making the assumption that the defense with Lynn and the new pieces is better than last year.
And in a different offensive kind of conference.
Yes. Right.
Their schedule is fairly friendly year 1.
Yeah, especially late. They don't have to play any cold games.
Yeah,
late.
no, this doesn't get grimy late where I felt like
it
attrition
certainly could have.
Speaking of Oklahoma, that's why I wanted to go over Oklahoma's schedule with Brian Edwards.
Yeah, which we'll do here in the next segment.
Because it's sandwiched in between weeks, you're it's Tennessee, then Auburn, and then I don't know, Missouri or somebody else good. It's I don't like it. It's different than being in the Big 12.
Yeah.
And you could be as good or better of a team than you were a year ago.
And lose more games.
Yeah.
So I'm
telling you, attrition and rigor is a real thing. Look at the stretch after Tulane.
Yeah. So after Tulane, so that's Tulane's their 3rd game of the season. They go Tennessee at home, at Auburn, Texas, South Carolina, at Ole Miss, and then they get a break with Maine.
Come on, man.
And then they go at Missouri, Alabama.
What are we talking about?
So you got 1, 2.
What are we talking about?
3, 4. You've got minimum of 5 teams that have playoff aspirations.
That's just and it's bang
that have
bang,
real
bang
playoff
bang,
aspirations,
bang, right?
Yeah, it's
just
relentless.
Just the degree of physicality that you have to play with in the trenches.
At Auburn is your rest week.
Yeah,
that's your break.
Yeah,
is at Auburn, and then South Carolina at home are your rest weeks. Which maybe South Carolina at home is a little bit more of one, but you're talking about going 4 out of 5 weeks where you're having a tough go with things. Yeah. That'll be interesting to see how Brian looks at that one.
And sometimes it doesn't have anything to do with record. The last couple of years, Coach Petito didn't yield a ton of wins, but there was a certain level of physicality that they were going to play with. So if you're playing Miller North, Miller West in succession,
That's a rough stretch for you.
Well, the last thing we're thinking about is how many wins does each team have? It's like, I mean, you're not going to be in a ton of spread playing nickel.
You're playing in a phone
right?
booth.
You're going to see pinning. You're going to see pulling. You're
Yeah.
going to see. I mean, like it just that those kinds of things matter.
Yeah, and that's going to be in an entirely different experience. Kind of like we were talking about with Oregon. It's going to be an entirely different experience for Oklahoma.
Right? Like playing. You saw the crazy record of teams that played Navy after they played Navy.
Oh yeah, it's dumb.
And it's not like Navy was lighting the world on fire. It's just there's just certain way teams play that it's.
And it's not just the style, right? It's not just like, oh yeah, the style throws you off for you. It's like, no, they're just banging their head against you for 4 hours on a Saturday.
Yeah, interior play. I don't know.
Is there anything to it like of I know you talk about like rigor a lot, but like and a lot of that's physical, right? But especially I guess specifically when you're playing a team like Navy, where you're like eye discipline and stuff has to be so good.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that is like a mental rigor also?
It's exhausting. I'm a big no ball guy, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Practicing defense without playing against the ball.
Get your eyes out of the back, especially like in our inside run period.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we draw our cards up. It's precise. Hey, you pin, you pull, you do this, you do that. Doesn't matter. Read your keys.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we don't even do it with backs. Right? But we'll have 7 guys at some point blocking.
Yeah.
Whether they're perimeter guys or O-line. I say all that to just say, like, there's a style in which you have to play.
Mm-hmm.
Especially we see different running styles. Like Illinois would not, or Minnesota. See, those wouldn't be fun teams to play back to back.
No.
Even though the record
won't be gaudy.
Yeah, it doesn't like lend itself to like, oh man, they're playing good teams. And people discount that. Like fans just, well, they weren't very good. It didn't mean it wasn't a physical game.
Yeah, it doesn't mean it wasn't hard.
Yeah, like I saw Mike Farrell was like, hey, early upset this season, like call it.
Mm-hmm.
I have one in my head. I think Georgia Tech will be much tougher on Florida State than I think the experts are going to think because of the way that Georgia Tech runs the football.
Yeah.
The quarterback run game, the way that they block, like it's going to be a nice little matchup on the interior, and it's the first one for FSU.
It'll be a good would you rather play that team first off the bat?
G-Tech?
Yeah. Or you want it like third game of the season when you built up a little bit of a lather? Because you certainly don't want them late, right?
Yeah, I'd try to get them out of the way early.
Yeah. Like you're not trying to play them game 11.
Yeah. And there are teams like that. So we talk about that our schedule all the time.
Yeah.
If you don't get them early, not late.
Right. Yeah. You don't want to, when you're already sort of a mash unit, you're not
trying I would want to play us early.
Yeah.
Right now, last year, not so much.
Yeah.
This year, I would rather.
There was a good time to play.
Yeah, because if you played us later last year, I mean, you have a chance for maybe injuries to pile up. Or something like that. Like, but anyway, I just like those schedules and when you play teams. It's just like Nebraska finally getting a bye team coming off a bye, right? It's like sometimes you don't want a team coming off a bye when you played 4 straight.
Yeah.
The record may not be gaudy, but
there's a practicality to it.
Yeah, that kind of stuff matters.
Coming up next, we're going to talk to our guy, Brian Edwards. We'll get into that Oklahoma schedule as well as a couple other teams. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back.
Were they using the cream cheese?
You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio. Now, Vegas insider, senior handicapper, and fan of the cold Budweiser bottles, Brian Edwards.
It's got to be touchdown, touchdown, touchdown.
Brian Edwards.
I don't really love it.
Brian Edwards.
Were they using the cream cheese to butter the bagel?
Brian Edwards.
I'm going with the cowgirl.
Here is Brian Edwards.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We're joined now by Brian Edwards, our Vegas insider from MajorLeague.com. What's up, B?
What's happening, fellas? How we doing?
What's up, Mr. Destin? Are we ready for UFC this weekend?
Not quite. I mean, I'm fired up for it. But in terms of picks, I got a lot of studying to do. I want to watch. I haven't even watched any of the pressers from Media Day.
Chunky. It's a chunky card too.
Yeah, I mean, I want to see Adesanya and Duplessis face to face, and I want to see who looks like they've got the fire in their eyes. Because, I mean, on one hand, you know, Adesanya was a very active champion. You know, he was more active than most of the champs are, and you know, he had the two monster fights with his nemesis Pereira, and then Strickland. Like, if you just, you know, that was just like, if it was football, you could just totally see where that's a flat spot, if you will, or, you know, just one you could overlook because he's so much better than Strickland, I think. But that night, he did not have it. So the question is, does he still have it, or was that just a little letdown situation. And he is 35. Does he still have that hunger? Whereas Duplessis, he is the one who's just absolutely on fire and has been running through everybody. And what he did to Whitaker, so it's I just don't know.
Allegedly, if you believe this is the healthiest Adesanya's been in years.
Yeah, we get that a lot during fight week.
Allegedly.
Right. So yeah, I don't know. So we'll see. But the one fight I do like, I do like Tai Tuivasa at plus 185. Look, I know he's lost 4 in a row, but look who he's lost to. 3 of those guys were top 5, gone. Pavlovich and Volkov. Volkov's actually number 3 right now. The only one I was surprised by, I think he's better than Tabora. But the first 2 were
talent-wise, yeah.
Yeah, I thought he's better than Tabora, but he lost that one. But the last 2 losses were submissions. He didn't get his bell rung and knocked out like he did against Pavlovic and Gone, but both of those were in 2022. And let's remember, he won 5 fights in a row before that. Whereas, Rosenstrike is getting up there in age. He's 36. Tuivasa's 31. And Rosenstrike's only 2-3 in his last 5 fights, and the 2 guys he beat were unranked. So I'm going to go with Bam Bam to get back in the win column as a plus 185 dog at BetMGM.
All right, let's start with our schedules. And their schedule sucks. The SEC did them no favors. Let's talk Oklahoma and win totals here. This schedule, it looks miserable.
Yeah, so at 7.5, I think they're a team that on paper is a lot better than a 7.5 win
I
total.
agree.
But
I agree.
Right. And look, they've got 2 terrible spots. They play at Ole Miss when they're coming off of playing Texas and then hosting South Carolina, and they go at Ole Miss where Ole Miss has got 2 weeks to prepare. And then 2 weeks later, they go at Missouri, and Missouri's got 2 weeks to prepare, and they're playing their 5th game in 5 weeks. So 2 of their toughest games on the road are not ideal ideal spots for the opponent that's at home. So I think they lose those 2. I think they probably lose to Texas, but you never know with that game.
Texas needs some running backs.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. They are down to 3 scholarship running backs. One of them an incoming freshman, and one a true sophomore, didn't play much last year. Now, Tennessee at home and at Auburn, I doubt they sweep those. Do they split those? They're minus 3.5 to Tennessee at last look at games of the year. I think they're better than Auburn, but Jordan-Hare, who knows? So, and then Alabama at home, they are in an ideal or a advantageous situation there as they get 2 weeks to prepare, and Alabama is a look ahead to Auburn, and then they are at LSU. So, man, I think they're a 7-5 or 8-4 team. And, I haven't seen much of Jackson Arnold. I know he didn't play that great in the bowl game. So I'm just kind of wait and see with these guys. Oh, and one injury, Jaden Gibson's out for the year. Their receiver, he only had 14 catches last year, but for 375 yards and 5 touchdowns.
It's interesting with them. They could be a better team than a year ago with a worse record.
Yes, much worse record.
B, let's go to Oklahoma's former conference, a team that I think a lot of people around here like in Kansas State. That is, I believe, 9.5. Last I saw it on their win total. How do you break down Kansas State's schedule?
Yeah, so I don't know if I wrote this down 2 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago, but I have FanDuel 9.5 under minus 144 over plus 118, and I've got them plus 400 to win the Big 12. So I've marked them 8-1 with 3 swing games. So they've got 8 starters back on defense, only 4 on offense, but DJ Giddens, stud running back, 1,226 yards last year, 5.5 yards per carry average. Avery Johnson, this guy is an absolute stud. Can he stay healthy, though? I did like how they went and got a starter or a guy with starting experience. Taquan Roberson from UConn had the season-ending injury a couple years ago, early in the year, but has 10 career starts, and he's a mobile guy, kind of like Avery Johnson. And I think Johnson stays healthy. He has a monster season. So anyway, 8-1 with 3 swing games. So I've got them losing at Iowa State, which is a winnable game. I've got their 3 swing games being at Tulane, where I think they probably win. And I've got at Colorado, a swing game where they'll be favored. I want to say they're like 6 in games of the year there. And then the other swing game I've got at West Virginia. But, I mean, there's other losables I've got them winning. I mean, I've got them beating Kansas at home. They'll be favored there, but Kansas is dangerous. And I've got them beating Oklahoma State at home. That'll be a tough one. And Arizona at home could be tough. They're -8 at FanDuel in that one. So I'm going to say that, I'm going to say it's a pass because I would say over if I was confident Avery Johnson would be healthy for 12 games. But the way he runs the ball, it's hard to be confident in that, right?
If I knew who was going to win that quarterback job at Tulane, I might. That's a tricky one in week 2 because that's on the road. Like, I wouldn't be excited for that.
Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss went there last year and trailed for 3 quarters and then turned it on in the 4th quarter and got a couple of turnovers that made it. They actually covered that game, but that was a very misleading final.
All right, let's go to. I don't even know if you can even call them a dark horse because I feel like they have enough people's attention now. But let's go to old Southern Methodist University and SMU in that Metroplex area.
Man, they got a great break on the schedule from the ACC office. And
it's incredible.
Yes.
I've got them at 8.5.
I like the over here, guys. FanDuel was 8.5 plus 104 to the over. But again, I might have wrote that down 2 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago. I'm not sure. So, I mean, Florida State at home. I think that's a tough one for FSU. I want to say they were favored by 9 in games of the year. But I mean, that FSU wants to get on the airplane with a 1-point win and get their butts back to Tallahassee in that one. So I've got them 10-1 with 1 swing game. I've got them losing at Louisville because it's after the FSU game. And I got FSU being a swing game. I mean, look at all the other games. I mean, obviously they could lose to TCU at home potentially, but I've got them winning that one. I mean, look at their road games. I mean, besides Louisville, at Nevada, at Stanford, at Duke, at UVA. I mean, those might be the 3 worst teams in the ACC in Stanford, Duke, and UVA. Those are their road games.
And on top of that, I actually think they have good talent too. So not only is the schedule favorable, that's a good football team.
Oh, man, Phil Steele's national unit rankings are so high on them. Number 9 at QB, number 15 at running back, number 8 wide receiver, 18 O-line, 25 D-line, number 10 linebacker, 19 in the secondary. Are we? How much time do we have?
Oh, you got time. We got 2 minutes. 90 seconds.
Okay, Preston Stone, 28-6 TDINT ratio last year. All of his wide receivers back. Their top 4 rushers back. Their top 7 tacklers back. Granted, a G5 conference, but only gave up 17.8 points per game last year. Okay, their O-line, they lost 3 starters, but both starters they got back first team All-AAC last year, and they got 4 Power 4 transfers on the O-line that have combined for 120 career starts. On the D-line, they got 2 transfers from Miami, one of them 22 starts in his career for the Canes, the other 20 career starts for the Canes. Their kicker, first team All-AAC last year. I mean, they got a ball club. I like the over.
And quietly, their NIL game is in full effect too.
Oh yeah,
they got plenty of extra scratch laying around that place.
Well, yeah, they started practicing NIL early, so they're used to it. They're ready to go.
Decades ago.
Well, and let's not forget Rhett Lashley is secretly a really good ball coach.
Thanks,
might be the next coach at Arkansas.
Yeah, that's the rumor, isn't it?
Ooh-wee. Oh, wait, no, it's Pig Suey. My bad.
A lot of pressure on old Sam I Am.
B, we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, fellas. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, B.
We'll be back with Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7, coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage. We are joined now by Michael Bruntz of Husker 24/7. What's up, Bruntz?
How's it going?
Pretty good. How about you?
Not bad. Not bad.
I'm just trying to process right now.
Fair to Midland would be like a Bruntz answer. Fair to Midland. I don't even know what that
Midland?
means, but I hear people say that, though.
I think that's like an old people. Like I think my mom used to say that.
Fair to Midland?
Yeah.
Bruntz?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Ravi and I are having this conversation on and off air about how to assess teams. Be honest now, not a leading question. When you look back at teams' records, how often do you think about when and at what point of the season they played the game?
When I look back,
yeah,
season's over. Nebraska's 8-4.
Like for instance, like when you looked at Colorado last year, and then you're like, oh man, they gave Nebraska a loss. Do you look at when they played Nebraska?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, I think a little bit. I mean,
Do you
have to?
Okay, so I just wondered how natural it is for you.
I think it's a data point. I mean, I think you look probably more whenever you, like in your Colorado example, where a team comes out and blows the doors off of TCU in the opener, looks okay against Nebraska in week 2, and then just struggled the rest of the way down the line. I mean, I think you do kind of have to look at the time and when that happened. I mean, I always kind of look. I don't think I'm a huge future schedule guy, but I note things like Nebraska having back-to-back road games against Ohio State and Indiana, and just when those games fall. And there's a few teams probably that whenever you see them on the schedule, though, you're like, okay, there's a chance that a team might be a little bit more beat up after playing this team. I mean, Michigan used to kind of be that way, I think, where you kind of knew you were in for a little bit of a physical game and you don't know what you're going to be coming out of that. But I think the Colorado example, you definitely have to consider kind of when they played that game, because I don't know how much Colorado you guys watched.
Well, unfortunately, they were on national television quite a bit, so it's like I watched.
You didn't have a choice.
I watched a ton. I remember I was coming back from one Nebraska broadcast, and I think they were playing Colorado State at night, and I was like,
which was a phenomenal game.
I'm like, why is this game on? Yeah, it was like multiple overtimes. I remember I had it on in my dash, playing it through the Bluetooth, and I was just like, how much more of this are we going to have to put up with?
Yeah, no. Well, then you got Colorado Stanford in prime time, and that didn't look good for Colorado.
Which also
either.
turned out to be like
a phenomenal game.
Like, whoa.
Yeah, they played some bangers last year. Not a lot of them went their way, but yeah, I think you consider it. Like, I think you do consider that. I don't know.
It's just weird. I look at Nebraska like
the reason this whole thing came up.
I look at like the team that lost to Minnesota versus who was trotting out there on offense by the time they played Maryland. Do you know what I mean? But it's like I don't love to do that when it comes down to bottom line, because everybody has things that happen throughout the course of the season.
Yeah.
But there is a story to tell within that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was even thinking more just about opponents by that point. I mean, because by the time you get late in the season, I mean, it is a test of depth, right? Like you're not gonna have all your guys that were starting for you in August by that point. I mean, that's just how the sport works. And so I don't know. I mean, I think you do have to consider. I think you have to consider the time of year that a game happens, but I don't know that can be an excuse for how the game turns out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's just a data point.
Yeah.
Bruntz, do you think more about what's happening with Nebraska or the team you're covering or rooting for or whatever than you do about the opponent? Because I think that's what I look at more. Is like, okay, that was the first game that Heinrich Harburg started, or if Colorado's case is like, well, they lost Travis Hunter in that game, so then I think I view it from a more myopic point of view and less about the opponent and more about what's happening internally, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, this past year, the game after Nebraska loses two of its top running backs, I mean, it's going to look markedly different. I mean, I think that's something that you kind of have to consider. And I understand it's like a bottom line thing, but there's
sounds more like
there's things within that affect the bottom line,
When you guys are describing this in my head, I'm like, okay, which do I do? I think one is more fan geared. One is more like analytically geared. like how a fan would maybe look at it versus I want to get in the nuts and bolts of this deal.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, maybe one's a little bit more of an emotional thing versus actually digging into it. I mean, I think I say this from like some of the teams that I root for. Sometimes I just don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? It's like, if I sit down and watch 3 hours of Oakland A's baseball, like I don't care that, I want to see a win. So I can understand that.
That's very interesting how you would think the fan perspective may be a little more excuse prone, but I actually think it's kind of tougher.
It is.
You're less, you know what I mean?
I think it's tougher when you haven't had success. Like when you're a team like Nebraska or unfortunately like your Oakland A's, and you haven't experienced a ton of success, you're tired of the excuses.
Yeah,
right?
you're less forgiving of the Broncos.
Whereas if you've been good,
then I would be.
If you've been good, you want to go back and get it and be like, well, our starting guard was hurt and our quarterback was coming off of a rolled ankle and he played, but he wasn't healthy. And like you start to, if you're 11-1, you want to explain the one, right? Yeah. Whereas if you're 5-7, you're like, hey, go and win any other game of the season and we would have been cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think when you're talking 7 years from a bowl game, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that some people are willing to entertain the nuance. You know what I mean? Like, at some point, just make the damn play. I mean, that's kind of where I think a lot of people are at. Is like, if you're in the red zone with a chance to go in and win the game. Like, regardless of who it is throwing a pass that's late and inaccurate. Like, I think that kind of colors the discussion around Nebraska football right now. Is, it would be one thing if it were like, you basically hadn't wandered through the wilderness for almost a decade. But, I think when you kind of are in that kind of a context, it tends to eliminate some of the patience there.
Bruntz, and the similar vein, and you're pretty rational. So why do you think it is that, like, Bryce Benhart can get better, but we come off as though Turner Corcoran cannot?
That's a good question.
I'm dead serious.
I don't know. No, I know. It is a good question. I mean, I think that's the big one for the offensive line is and then there was actually a thread on our board about it this week about whether or not he's kind of poised to make that, whether he could be the Benhart 2.0, like, and he's not alone. I mean, there's other guys that have been around the program for a long time, and you're kind of wondering if they could do the same thing.
We almost left Tommy Hill for dead, didn't we?
You did. We did. At least Turner's sticking at one position, I guess. That's the one thing to say. But
well, it's just weird because I remember, and the thing that I bristle up, I remember what was said about Ramir Johnson after Maryland. Oh, that guy's too small, or he can't do this, or he needs a hole, and then it's like, well, then he gets hurt. Oh, he's just injury prone. Like, maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. Now that he's back, it's like, ooh, go Ramir. It's like it's just we pick and choose when we want to be optimistic about development and best case results, even though there's like proven track records all over the place.
There are. I mean, there's some for the other way too. I think that in college football now too, I think it's hard to, even if Matt Rule stands up there and says, we're a developmental program, some guys are going to take a couple of years, and this is like there's not the built-in patience, it's very much a win now type thing, and guys developing quickly. I mean, guys being written off early in their careers are not. I mean, I understand that Corcoran's older, but guys being written off and kind of feeling like you have the book on somebody. I mean, that's not a new phenomenon,
Yeah, Bruntz, I guess could I make the argument to you that, and I understand there's examples of it going the other way too, where guys just don't get better or it doesn't work out. But I guess specifically on the offensive line, and I know it's a small sample size over 2 years with Raiola, but the vast majority of the evidence would tell you that the players get better, right? Like, I mean, we don't have at least that I can think of, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Like, do we have a lot of examples of, in that specific group with Raiola, things sliding backwards for guys? Because I don't really recall it if we do.
No, I don't think guys sliding backwards. I think they have done a pretty nice job. Certainly Dienhart. I think Justin Evans, you could probably put in that category as well, for the way they've kind of developed him.
I think you put Newelly in that category last year. I thought he got a lot better.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, I think that's. I think it's not specific to this coaching staff. I mean, I think when I'm speaking from strictly like what I read from fans, it's more like guys kind of just plateau. You know what I mean? Like a guy's been in the program for 3 years. You don't kind of see the market progress. I mean, even like Dienhart, I mean, that was year 5 for him where things took off. I mean, I think there's definitely the potential for guys to do that. I mean, another case in that group too, Henry Lutovsky's kind of in that group too, I think, where it's, guy's been around for a while, hasn't played a ton, but I mean, can he kind of make that next jump? So, no, I mean, that group in particular, I think guys have stayed pretty steady and gotten better. But I'm just, from what I read, it's a lot of wait and see.
So I guess my question would be, from what you read, it seems like they're unable to separate the last 2 years from the longer term problems. Is that a fair assessment?
I think the pain is just kind of all rolled into one. Okay. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Okay, that makes sense.
Bruntz, have you allowed yourself, or do you think about, we always talk about players getting better in their development. How about the staff kind of year 2 together situationally, now that offense has a little bit better identity and the defense has now had a chance to make adjustments in year 2? Well, the staff will be better in game because they share some of that responsibility too.
Yeah, they do. I mean, if you kind of go back and look at the way that November played out last year, there were some spots where it was a little iffy, I think. And I think part of it is, that they have another year of kind of understanding their personnel, and who can help you and who can't. I mean, part of it too was you got to the end of last season and it was kind of like, okay, who are we putting in here right now?
Yeah.
Like, what are we
hey, who's in this personnel package?
Yeah. It's like, what freshmen are we trotting out there in a key moment? No, I think there's definitely something to be said for that. Tony White or Matt Rule said something about the defense that kind of piqued my interest, but it feels like we're maybe not defensively talking enough about like what does year 2 look like for this group in terms of how kind of more advanced Nebraska can get. Because, I think it was Matt Rule said, we're doing a lot of things differently defensively this year based on the personnel that we have. And I was kind of intrigued by that because, it does feel like you're kind of moving on to like the 200 and 300 level type stuff that you can do with that defense. And, I think probably, especially on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, for a guy like Rob Dvorak having his second year in this defense, I guessing he could probably coach it and teach it a heck of a lot better than he could this time last year. I'm guessing Terrence Knight was the same way. So, the coaching piece of it, the in-game decision part of it, that all kind of plays together. And, you're hammering the chasing 3 message. It's, some of those decisions are part of that as well. And you look at 5-6 plays during the course of a game, a decision here or there can really kind of shift the balance. So I agree that's part of it. And, I would hope that they're better off for kind of having gone through last year and kind of where they're at as coaches now.
Yeah, I asked Gifford at Big Ten Media Days because I want to know specifically. I'm like, I keep hearing, you guys are, hey, we got to get better. You guys haven't done anything yet. And I said, yeah, the conferences have film on your defense, but you're also year 2, and you get to make adjustments and tweaks. And he sat up in his seat, didn't he? And he goes, Ravi, he goes, yeah, exactly. Like, we get to build on what we did last year, and we now know where we weren't very good and where we were vulnerable. And I'm like, it's so understated. Like, there's things I can do with Christian Jones this year that I wouldn't have done last year. Like, it's just like those kinds of things matter. You can have tape, but we got a marker and dry erase board too, like at Nebraska.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I mean, from being around practice in very limited doses, I don't think that there's anything in the way that Tony White coaches during a practice that would suggest to me that they're resting on what they did last year. Like, that's just not part of the way he operates. And I don't know. I mean, when you have a guy like John Butler come in and say, yeah, this defense is really pretty unique, like, and you kind of layer that on top of what they said about, what they're doing differently this year, I'm kind of curious to see what that looks like, because I think that's the next step. And I mean, you can get into like the third down defense and turnovers, which are a big piece of that, but I don't think it's going to be the same type of group and scheme that's going to be trotted out that first week against UTEP. I mean, I'm expecting to see some different wrinkles there.
And they slid a couple of things in low key, right? Early on and before the season started in the first presser, it's like, hey, what's one of the areas you want to get better at? And Tony White was like, hey, I want to match our secondary up on receivers better. We got caught in some bad matchups last year. Like, that kind of falls on deaf ears, but hey, you may not want, Gifford on a number 2 in the slot to an open side or whatever it is, right? Whatever. But like, if the more you can cross train, like, the better situationally you can be within your scheme. That's pretty scary if you can do that.
Well, I mean, we've talked about him, but I mean, having Javin Wright on the field for 3 downs, I mean, that changes.
Right. You get a tight end and he's flexed out and you got to get underneath 3. Like, you trust Wright can get there. He's used to covering.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think bigger roles for guys like that are a little bit more versatile. That's maybe where the magic is there, right? Like, you can do different things that you maybe couldn't do last year.
Bruntz, it seems like a place that at least the Big Ten Network thought there might have been some magic was in the defensive front. Both Griffith and Rebson had some pretty glowing things to say. Were you surprised at all about kind of how effusive they seemed? I know you guys wrote up about it on Husker 24/7. Did that take you by surprise at all, or are you kind of on the same page as far as what you think that defensive front can be?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a pretty obvious one, in a place that probably deserves focus. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of like, it feels like if you kind of know about Nebraska's defensive line and you're outside of our bubble, it feels like you've like found like this really good restaurant that not many people know about. And I mean, you've got, I mean, this isn't hyperbole. I mean, I think you've got a legit 3 deep of guys that you'd probably trust on that defensive line. And then you kind of have the more situational guys like James Williams. I think Kai Wallen's probably a little bit more in that group as well. But yeah, there's a lot of guys you can move around. I mean, Ty Robinson looks like he's, an adult playing against little kids out there. I mean, that's how big he looks. And, what's the next step for Nash? I mean, I think there's a lot of rightful intrigue about that group and what it can be. Because I think they've done a really nice job of building depth there, and certainly, getting Nash and Ty back. I mean, that just completely changes the look of your defense.
Let me ask you something, Bruntz. If you had your druthers and you put your fan hat on for a second, and you want Nebraska to have the type of success that the rest of the fan base does, who are we talking about more at the end of the season? Rob Dvorak's development or the addition of Glenn Thomas?
I think Thomas. I'll go Thomas because I think having somebody whose only job is to just deal with quarterbacks, I think there's a lot of value in that. And I think it allows Marcus Satterfield to kind of be an offensive coordinator a little bit more. I think if you have the kind of success that fans are wanting, I think a lot of it is going to be because of improved quarterback play. I mean, it just has to be better. And, I think a lot of it is going to be due to that coaching. And, the thing too, I mean, when you're talking about a group that has, 2 of the 3 guys and, scholarship guys in that room are freshmen, you kind of have to manage that a little bit differently too. And kind of how you bring guys along, what you talk about, that kind of thing. So I think it would be more towards his work, but I mean, that's not to discount the job that Dvorak has in front of him, where you basically have 3 guys that you feel probably good about right now, and you have to bring along a couple more. So, I mean, he's got his work cut out too, but I think the Glenn Thomas piece of it is I think would be more impactful just because of how many areas the quarterback play touches.
Man, I just hope, selfishly, that Dvorak gets his flowers after this year, because I think he's pretty spectacular. I want those guys to really, like, I think they have the best case study for development. Like if you're starting with your lab experiment, like I think he has the best test subjects where you can say, yep, that guy was worth his salt.
I mean, he did last year too, right? I mean, you had Mekhi Bayer come out of nowhere early in the season, and he's playing Jack, and he's got, he's playing middle linebacker too. And I don't know. I mean, are we talking enough too about kind of how you have to fill that void left by Henrich and Reimer, just from a leadership point of view? I mean,
maybe, but I don't get the sense that we really appreciated their play.
Probably not.
Do you know what I mean? If you're looking for a reverence standpoint, I don't know if we thought that much of them. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Reimer maybe more than Henrich.
Yeah.
That's fair.
That's our guy, Michael Bruntz, Husker 24/7. Great stuff as always, Bruntz. We'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good. See you.
Thanks, Brunsey.
Coming up next, we've got more Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln.
We will be back. 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 You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're back here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFOR in Lincoln, and reminding you to get out to Lauritsen Gardens for their garden games through September 2nd. They've got all sorts of stuff. If you want to check out the videos, DB and I went out there. DB got dominated in badminton. It was embarrassing for him.
Why are you fibbing to that?
You know, you would think his general athleticism would translate. It didn't.
Dude, the one that you hit over my head, it's the first time I touched a racket and a birdie in 30 years. And what happened the very next time? It's almost like I got a feel for it.
I don't recall.
Yeah.
All I know is that you got to get out to LauritsenGardens.org to get tickets. And unfortunately, I don't know that they have the video playing on a loop anywhere of me just dominating DB in badminton. But
I know one thing.
I haven't seen
after
it
you
yet.
saw my footwork and run around that forehand, you're like, oh yeah, this dude's serious.
That was good. That was nice. It was good footwork, moving around on the forehand.
Yeah.
Get out to LauritsenGardens.org for tickets. It was a fun time out there, though.
We had a full slate yesterday. We went in the afternoon for however long. It seemed like 18 hours. And there were people still trying to play tennis before the rain started.
Oh, yeah.
And it was some older folks. And I'm like, you know how hard this sport would be? I mean, they were fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to be in their 50s.
Oh, yeah.
60s. And I'm like, I'm not returning any of those. And I'm okay. Like, just to watch these serves, I'm like, I don't even. I think I need a better appreciation for tennis because
tennis is really hard.
I'm watching these guys just return balls at 130-mile-an-hour serves, like no big deal.
Yeah.
How fast 130-mile-an-hour is?
Really fast. You have no reaction time.
Yesterday, I'm probably watching 70-75, and I'm like, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think people you wouldn't even see it. If you've got like Ben Shelton out there going like 145 on you, you're not even seeing that.
Yeah, no.
You wouldn't know it hit you until you fell down.
I would think of the was that Mr. Deeds where they were playing tennis on the court and he kept hitting the ball?
Yeah,
out?
he's like, hey, if I just hit you, does that count as in?
I could just imagine if you had guys serving and they served at you.
Whatever the hell
I would just be getting out of the way.
They do that sometimes because it forces you to make a decision with your body about how you want to hit the ball.
Yeah, I'm not very reflexy anymore. Dunk, dunk.
Just taking them like Happy Gilmore in the batting cage.
You know how you have those little suction cups marks from treatment and stuff. Hey, what'd you get worked on? Nope, it's tennis. That's what that was.
Man, I see people. I know people.
I think that's why pickleball got popular because it's not near the speed and it's very similar in terms of movements.
There's some carryover. It's much less technical, so there's a lower barrier of entry to learning it.
Isn't the court smaller too?
It is.
Yeah, significantly.
So it's a little bit easier to navigate if you're not quite in shape yet. But
did you watch ping pong in the Olympics?
Oh yeah, those guys are crazy.
That was ludicrous.
Yeah, those are insane. I like ping pong a lot, actually.
I know two very, very good ping pong players.
Yeah,
Bud Crawford, Tom Thompson.
Bud Crawford makes sense. Hand speed, coordination.
Yeah. And Tom is like 6'12", so his wingspan is about
gets everything.
94
Oh,
inches.
dang.
Yeah, I would imagine.
He can use both hands.
I would imagine Bud would be brutal to play against.
Yeah, he's highly competitive too.
Yeah, I've seen him at Summer League.
Yeah, right.
He used to get after him.
Oh,
man.
I know.
It was a lot of fun.
I know.
He would come. I'd like it when his fights were scheduled in a way that he'd be able to come out.
Yeah.
Like I liked it when he fought like in April, May, so that he'd come out and play all of Summer League rather than he was fighting like July, August, and he'd be out in training camp somewhere.
Watched him hit a softball about 315 feet too.
Yeah, he might just be a good athlete.
The great ones do. They're not satisfied.
You know, it's that's on the table. I think that Bud Crawford, good athlete.
Is that on the table?
Yeah, I think it is.
Man, I'm gonna give that some thought.
I don't think that's a hot take. I think he's a pretty good athlete.
Hot take. Kind of like the Viking season's over without McCarthy.
I know he's not
hot take
super tall, but can you imagine that guy playing corner?
Bud?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like I feel like he would just lock people up.
Oh, he's a rail too.
You're not trying to get not anymore, man. He's going 154 full time.
Man, hopefully they get Ortiz maybe or somebody. I don't know. We'll see what the next fight looks like.
I'm just saying, can you imagine him in bump and run? He got that little punch on you. Good luck, bud.
Yeah. His reflexes are
insane.
Obviously incredible.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it.
Unbelievable. It's hard to believe that me and him are the same species.
You know what else is hard to believe? Right. How are the Steelers on Get Up again?
Because they got done talking about J.J. McCarthy.
So if you were going to be in sports media right now,
I wouldn't be talking about the Steelers.
No, but time out though.
Yeah.
There's probably only three things you need to know.
Okay.
Right? Steelers.
Quarterback battle.
The Jets.
Aaron Rodgers.
And what else is always on?
We're just talking.
There's a lot of Ayuk stuff every day.
It's and if you really want to be fancy, somehow weave in LeBron and the Lakers.
Oh, CD. We get CD every day.
It's like
CD Lamb's contract.
Oh, are we still doing this?
Yeah. Listen, it's the
how about Dak calling his shot? Or Parsons calling his shot? CD will be in camp. Does CD know that?
Well, we're kind of like Jerry Rice tweeting out and be like, hey, does Brandon know he's coming back?
Yeah. Yeah, apparently Jerry Rice may not be that nice of a guy sometimes.
I mean, listen.
We got all the old guys. Emmett is speaking on
when you're the GOAT.
Dallas and stuff. You got Jay Rice speaking on San Fran.
When you got the
when they gonna ask Greg Lloyd about what's going on in Pittsburgh?
Ain't nobody asking Greg Lloyd.
Not if you don't want to answer. I know that.
I feel like James Harrison's more of a spokesperson type.
Full disclosure, I'm probably gonna take Lloyd though, and I know Harrison is a
preference or ability.
Ability. He's like a 6th or 7th degree black belt.
Okay. Yeah.
Greg Lloyd.
That's aggressive.
Yeah. Yeah,
Not
but
trying to test that.
But I'd take, anytime Harrison wants to go on a dark alley,
Yeah,
I'd take him with me.
I'll take him in my corner for sure.
I was tweeting out a couple of pictures last week or the week before. He was at Steelers camp, just wearing a black T-shirt and shorts, mean mugging everybody.
Yep, walking around with a bad attitude.
Yep. TJ Watt was like, "Man, I heart him."
He seems like a football player's football player.
Yeah,
like that's the vibe I get of James Harrison.
How many times they cut him before he was a star?
Several.
Yeah,
he didn't do anything until he was like 28.
Yeah,
in terms of sticking.
Funny thing is when you look,
and then he played until he was like 40.
Like the organization, like I say it tongue in cheek, but I don't know why they're on every day.
Yeah,
every day there's something on about the Steelers, and most people don't. I listened to two guys yesterday afternoon, and it was the team. The team that both guys picked to win the division, the Bengals.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you
see Nick Wright?
Dude, Burrow on the Pivot podcast.
Yeah,
was incredible.
Really? I'm a big Burrow guy. You know this.
He's kind of neurotic.
Yeah, he is. Way more so than you would think for how.
Right, because he comes across as just fun,
cool.
lovey. Man,
yeah. No, he is.
He's got his style, and
he is full on.
Yeah, pee or get off the pot.
Yeah, he is. It's kind of. I think. I mentioned we do this with coaches sometimes in terms of like how a guy looks depends on how we judge them a little bit. I feel like we do that with quarterbacks too a little bit, where like Tom Brady, you don't expect somebody that's like good looking like Tom Brady. You kind of assume that maybe everything came easy to him. They came more naturally. Where it's like, no, Tom Brady's a full-on psycho about football and prep and stuff like that. Where you see Peyton Manning, where he sort of looks like a dork, and you're like, yeah, that guy's in the film room a lot.
You're like, hey, Burrow, why'd you dye your hair? I was bored. Switch it up. Need something different to do.
Yeah.
Different look for myself. Like,
now he's going full Slim Shady on us.
He's telling a story about how nobody can visit him on Saturdays. His parents come in town sometimes to see him. He's like, no.
Turn around. Go back to the hotel.
Not on Saturdays. Like, this is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Like, he just, but you watch him and you listen to him, like when he's mic'd up and stuff. It's like, man, I'd rally with this dude.
Oh, yeah. Like, he definitely puts the requisite work in and a little bit more.
I still think he has pressure.
I do too.
And I love him, but I think he's getting a pass.
I think so, because he hasn't been bad. He's just been hurt.
Yeah.
We're more willing to forgive the things we didn't see than the things we did see. Right? Like if you see something bad, that's hard to forget. When you just don't see anything new, it's easy to remember the good stuff, right? Like that's kind of human nature. Bad stuff sticks in our mind pretty aggressively.
Who's got the tougher head coach quarterback situation, Sirianni or Saleh?
Ooh. Well, I want to say Saleh because I think Aaron Rodgers is harder to deal with, but I know there's issues between Sirianni and Hurts. If I didn't know about pre-existing issues, I'd say Saleh and Rodgers because I think Rodgers is a nightmare to deal with. That's the vibe that I get.
You know who kind of gets a pass?
Who?
It's always the Jets, isn't it? Not the pass.
It seems like Shanahan kind of gets a pass.
Kyle?
Yeah.
For what? For blowing stuff?
Yeah.
It
don't like
it doesn't stick.
It's crazy.
Like people bring it up, but it doesn't stick. Yeah. I think there's just I think there's a respect for him that people
is what he is.
Yeah, that's just like he'll get it eventually. I think he's young enough too. People assume he'll go get one. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll wrap up the show. Coming up next.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up the show today here on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, KFR, and Lincoln. That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla here on the Pillar Exterior stage at Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill. Kind of a weird exchange happening on Twitter with Amazing Daniel and DB. They're both espousing their love for Miami Dolphin great Joey Porter. It's strange.
It's not.
I don't know why you're doing that.
Yeah, Miami Dolphin great.
It's weird.
Well, he's one of those guys. You asked a long time ago.
With the Cardinals.
Yeah. Where you have like an irrational blind spot.
Yeah. He's one of yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
get that.
I mean that. I don't know, just that linebacking core. And the only guy I was probably out on may have been the most consistent of the bunch, and that was Levon Kirkland.
Yeah.
But I couldn't get over the body type. I love him because he was,
a Steeler.
He was a Steeler.
Yeah.
Isn't that the one everybody liked, though?
Levon Kirkland?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe.
You know who I was irrationally a big fan of?
Chad Brown?
No. Two guys.
Seattle Seahawks Chad Brown? I mean, according to you.
Oakland Raider Jerry Rice.
Yeah.
Denver Bronco Jerry Rice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really loved Merton Hanks.
But you know what's interesting, though?
Yeah.
And I get it because of the Super Bowl. You see a lot of Peyton Manning stuff in Denver.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's funny because the Super Bowl he actually won, like he was bad that year. Like really bad.
Like Brock
Osweiler was a better option.
It was just
That's how bad Peyton Manning.
Are you talking like gear or like signage?
Yeah. Yes.
So
like in articles and stuff, it's like,
yeah.
Is there Elway gear beside it?
Oh wow!
I'm just throwing it out there.
Wow.
I was a big Merton Hanks guy.
You know, this is. I don't even know if I should say this, but you could have convinced me that Elway was overrated.
Oh, I could buy that. I could buy that.
I know, like Sam and some of these guys, they'll kill me for that.
Historically, he's not going to stand up the way. Like, you're going to have to explain a lot if you're still.
I go all the way back to Stanford.
Oh, okay.
Right, like the folklore. It was just like
because they weren't very good at Stanford either.
Right, didn't win like
he didn't win at Stanford. They were very good.
But I get the whole
that's
Yankees
the funny thing
thing.
That's the funny thing about the Stanford Cal game, the band game, right? Is like that was not good teams.
Look, so who would you be? I referenced two of them already. Who would you rather be going into this season?
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Mike McCarthy.
Okay.
Saleh.
Mm-hmm. Or is that just those two?
No.
Okay.
I'm drawing a blank. My second guy. I just said it earlier. Oh, Sirianni.
Oh. My gut says McCarthy.
See,
but here, you
got to think about their situation.
Right. Yeah. Okay. If I understand there's always drama in Dallas, right? But
for all intents and purposes, you think Jerry Jones is a good owner?
I think he's mostly a good owner. I think he's going to end up paying CD. I think there's no open festering wounds between McCarthy and the quarterback. Like, for being Dallas, and this is a weird, like, I'm going to choose the situation with the least amount of drama. And weirdly enough, I think that's Dallas. Because that is normally not the thing you associate with Dallas is drama-free. Because there's always going to be the noise, right? But internally, I don't think it's a very dramatic locker room right now.
So, and we're operating under the assumption that CeeDee Lamb signs, right?
Yeah, that he gets paid. Yeah, I assume he's going to. Jerry ends up paying everything.
Because you do realize if CeeDee Lamb, they're the most impacted, I think, by
if CeeDee Lamb doesn't get paid.
If CeeDee Lamb doesn't play, Dallas isn't good.
Yeah, yes, I am.
I mean that offense turns into TI mediocre.
Yeah,
in a hurry.
I'm under the assumption that CeeDee Lamb's going to get paid because Jerry pretty much pays everybody. Like that's just what he does. And I am not under the assumption that things are just going to magically work out between Hurts and Sirianni.
Right, but let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Who has the better roster, the Jets or Dallas?
Jets, probably.
You could make the case it's the Jets.
I think Jets have a good roster. I think they do. I am less sold on Philly's roster
so
than some people are.
You would still rather be McCarthy?
Yes, I would. I am choosing the
just because the Jets have that cloud.
Yeah, and it's also
they're the Jets.
Well, for two things: A, the drama. Because would I rather
for all the negativity we throw on Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah,
he sure does win a lot.
But
when he plays,
considering what
he plays,
okay, yeah,
he always wins.
Considering what we believe his talent to be, can I make the argument that he should have won more?
Listen, if the Jets win the division and they're the playoffs, is it that did he overcome the fact that they're the Jets, or is it not good enough because we expect Aaron Rodgers to win rings?
I mean, I expect Aaron Rodgers to win rings.
But it's pretty hard, though.
It is. But guys of his caliber have multiple rings. Like throughout the history of the NFL, guys that we talk about the way we talk about Aaron Rodgers have multiple rings. That's almost a foolproof statement. That's how it goes. If you're going to be talked about the way we talk about Aaron Rodgers, you have multiple rings. Like that was that. I mean, I'm trying to think of anybody.
I don't know if I love that.
I think it's true. Like I don't know. The guy that I thought of first that's the most well-regarded that doesn't have multiple, the guy that came to my mind was Steve Young. Steve Young gets talked about with a lot of reverence, and I think rightfully so.
We don't talk about Steve like we talk about
Rodgers, though.
Yeah.
Not in that same category, but he's the closest one I could think of off the top of my head. I can't think of a guy.
You might have been talking about him like that back in like 94, 95, though.
But he certainly didn't have the longevity. Like he had a peak that was really, really good. Like he had 4 or 5 years. That was probably in that neighborhood. But Rodgers has been doing this for 15 years. if a little longer actually, or right at 15, I think, pretty close.
Yeah, because he had to sit.
Yeah, so he sat a couple. He came out in 05, so like 15, 16 years. But I mean, if you can come up with guys, I'm open to it. But the guys that we talk about, because we talk about Aaron Rodgers as an all-timer, and the guys that we talk about in that way all have multiple rings, all of them.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of guys that I don't know. I mean, Marino comes to mind with none.
Yeah.
But there are some guys.
But that also defines Marino.
But here's my pushback. There are guys that have multiple that I would put nowhere near an Aaron Rodgers category.
That's 100% true. Your Eli Manning's of the world is the first one that pops up. I mean, Eli Manning's the most recent one with multiple rings that you wouldn't put anywhere near that category. Probably like Staubach. I throw Bradshaw in there, not trying to be offensive, but
that's
there's
more than you'd probably
right. There are guys, so like it goes the other way, but generally, and here's the argument that I'd be open to is, do we only talk about guys that way because they got multiple rings? Like if you wanted to reverse engineer it and be like, do we talk them about that way as opposed to other guys?
Well, I don't know if I would say that either, because I think the only but guy that has multiple is Manning.
Recently, yeah. Recently. Like in the last 30 years.
Like he's the one that can't shake, well, hey, man, I won multiple.
Yeah, that doesn't matter for him because we saw too much of the other stuff. I don't think there's another guy. I mean, Lamar could be headed down that path.
Yeah.
But it would be about another decade of being good.
So I saw a stat the other day about when Lamar Jackson plays and when they don't, and it's twice the points.
Yeah, it's unreal.
It's incredible.
Yeah. But his playoff success is a huge hole in his resume, right?
It's incredible.
It is. And the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. Like, your point's well taken. He wins a ton. But there's massive holes, and there's a massive hole in his resume.
I don't know, man. I'm not here for the staunch Aaron Rodgers defense, but because I have said, given his talent, you'd think he'd have more than one.
Yeah.
But he needs some things to go right, too.
I mean, I think they had pretty good situations in Green Bay for a lot of that tenure.
I don't know, man. We don't love McCarthy.
Right, but we've also made the argument that that's silly, too.
No.
Or that we
No, we haven't made that argument. We made the argument that Sean Payton gets more love than McCarthy, even though
doesn't make a lot of sense.
McCarthy's the better version of the two.
Yeah, I do think McCarthy is the better version of the two. And maybe we don't love McCarthy, and that's fine, but I don't know. I think you're talking about a handful of guys in any given time in the league that were definitely better than McCarthy. Like,
and at no point would I say that about Aaron Rodgers.
That there were a handful of guys better than him?
Mm-hmm.
No, I wouldn't either. I wouldn't either.
I have to give that some.
So that's the other thing.
I don't love.
I can see you bristling up.
Yeah, I don't like that.
But
really.
I would need some data points.
Well, I think you start with like number one. I feel like we're saying two things, right? McCarthy doesn't get the love that he should, but because Aaron Rodgers had him, he should have won more.
I think McCarthy is better than people think about him as. I'm not saying he should have won more with McCarthy. I'm saying I don't think McCarthy was an active hindrance to him winning more. And I think that's how other people view McCarthy. I was like, oh, he was dealing with McCarthy. I don't think he was an obstacle to Aaron Rodgers winning more. Was there, like, if he had Bill Belichick, would he have won more? Yeah, probably. Like, sure. But, if he had Andy Reid, would he have won more? Yeah. But I don't think he was an active hindrance to Aaron Rodgers winning Super Bowls. That's my only point. Not that, because he had McCarthy, he should win more. What I will do, though, is I'll go look at the guys with the multiple Super Bowls.
I am. That's what I'm going.
No, I'm going to go look. I'm going to go think about their coaches, too.
I'm going to go chart their coaches. What's getting ready to go happen. Because whether it's Elway or I look at some of the Super Bowl wins, and it wasn't because of quarterback play.
No, for sure. I mean, Manning.
So I got to take a look at that.
Peyton's is the best example, and I think that is a blotch on Peyton's record is that he didn't win when he should have.
At his peak.
That's DB. I'm Ravi Lulla. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap up the week here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
See you. Have a good day. Love you.
I love you too. We'll talk to you later.